When I bumped into the girl I like, she looked at me with disgust. I really don't have a chance with this girl. Damn it, why is she so hot? Right after that, some rich jerk hit me on the head and told me to stop staring at Joe Yunyi. My life was basically just that. I was buying the guy treated like a total loser. The guy who just wanted to chill in the corner, reading his comics in peace. But the universe decided to end the world right in the middle of my school day. An explosion shattered the hallway windows. A bizarre, gigantic purple monster appeared out of nowhere, tearing through the school floor. The same arrogant bully who had just humiliated me was now cowering on the ground, trembling and begging for his life. And while he was crying, a glowing blue screen floated right in my face. The message was straight to the point. Humanity was being wiped out. And I had been chosen to fight the catch, survive 66,000 years of torture and training in an otherworldly tower, just to gain enough power to save Earth. But the system gave me a loophole. As an initiation bonus, I could pick any skill or item I wanted to help me climb the tower, anything. The rule was clear, so I looked at that floating window and asked for a skip ticket. The system tried to block me, saying I couldn't do that, that it would destroy the balance of things. And that's not how the trial worked. But I yelled back the rule said any item was allowed. Cornered by its own flaw, the system was forced to hand over the golden ticket. I activated the item right then and there. I skipped the 66 sinners 666 years of hell in a single second. The whole city was swallowed by a blinding light. The system started spamming notifications non-stop, congratulating me for clearing the Tower of Trials. All my restrictions were lifted. My stats, my powers, and my magic were unlocked and maxed out at SSS rank. I was no longer a mere human. I woke up as an absolute god. The purple monster roared at me and charged to devour me. I didn't blink and didn't take a single step back. I just raised my hand and flicked the creature on the forehead. The impact was a miscalculation. The force was so brutal that I didn't just disintegrate the monster. I wiped the school off the map, annihilated Seoul, and sent a wave of destruction that sliced through the entire country in a fraction of a second. It was a planetary level strike. What Tain thinks that wasn't what he was expecting. He is impressed as the system calculates the rewards, gaining many things for having eliminated 389 gates, conquered a challenge, and killed 1,000,000 monsters. Tian thinks he didn't expect so much, with the total casualties caused by him reaching 2 billion. The bully comments that it was insane. He asks what exactly happened there, and Tian is impressed by this formality. Tian says that if he's right, he can use magic activating the time reversal ability. He could reverse all of that. Finally utilizing the ability, the effects of the flick begin to be reversed to 0, with the monster returning to stand before the protagonist Tian finishes his magic. The monster panics, afraid of all that. The protagonist asked how that works and is startled. It was his first time as a transcendent. He wants to know where the balancing went while the monster tries to flee, but Tian traps it with coordination magic. He says he feels bad for taking the monster's life twice, so he uses a dimensional portal to send it to another dimension. Tian stretches right after that. The bully comments that it was incredible, and that Tian had managed to sweep away that terrible monster. Protagonist replies that he didn't do that, he just sent it to another dimension. The delinquent says it was expected from Mr. Pervert and that he knew he could count on him, because Tian had saved his life. Now that he remembers, the delinquent hadn't said nice things before. Tian says that seeing the delinquent trying to protect him from the monster, he had asked him to buy bread earlier. If he remembered correctly, the bully gets scared and tells him to forget about it. As the protagonist walks towards him, the delinquent tries to shout that everything was fine, and that he didn't need anything anymore. He feels very sorry, begging for forgiveness. Tian observes for a few seconds, telling the bully to wait a bit as Tian had something he needed to do first. Looking outside, the delinquent sees several monsters attacking the city. He screams in fear and asks to be saved. Tian repeats for the bully to wait a bit, but the bully asks if there was anything more important than saving the school. The protagonist says he needs to save his mother and father first. The bully replies that was fair. The protagonist activates his teleportation ability, disappearing from that place. At home, a commercial about an afternoon nap was playing on TV. Tian's parents were watching. The mother asks why it seemed like a single person, and the father replies that it was a perfect day to watch TV on the couch, until the news interrupts, announcing that Seoul was under attack and that everyone should evacuate immediately. Tian's father gets up from the couch startled. He wonders what was happening outside. Monsters were fighting to destroy the city of Seoul. They wonder what that was. Meanwhile, a monster approaches the window. It prepares a power in its fist, while Taehyung's parents try to hide, but Taehyung appears behind the creature and asks what was happening. He uses his inverted gravity ability on the target. In contact, the monster begins to levitate as high as it can. Screaming in panic, Taein approaches the window and calls his parents, saying he was still the same son. His parents ask what that was and why he was there without taking off his shoes when entering the room. Taein shouts that wasn't important now. But anyway, they worked hard to take care of him for 16 years. The sight of a son glued to his phone, reading manhwas was something that worried them. But they don't need to worry anymore because he was chosen as humanity's savior. His parents ask what nonsense he was talking about. Taein says he always thought about how manhwa protagonists acted in the face of calamities, like that these characters received powers in their respective works or opportunities to fulfill their desires. But Taein wonders if they didn't worry about their parents, because he would never be like that. Using several enhancements on his parents, they ask what nonsense their son was talking about. Taein says he will protect his parents above all else, creating barriers around the house. He says this should keep them safe for now, as the monsters won't be able to touch them. But now he would save the rest of the world, and his parents ask what he was talking about. Taein says goodbye, telling them he loves them. He disappears immediately after, while his parents say they love him too. Back at school, Taein appears, and the bully says he's back. Questioning how his parents were, Taein replies that they must be fine now. The bully says that was a relief, but Taein remembers the bread the bully had told him to buy, so he says he can't help himself. As a former boy who was bullied by this bully, it was his duty to teach him a lesson. He activates mass summoning magic, scaring the bully. Taein says it must be hamburger buns this time, so he should stuff himself with it. Throwing several food packages, the bully is flooded with hamburger buns and then stands up. Taein says he is weak. At most, would be a 7 out of 10 on the satisfaction scale. The bully asks what he was talking about, as he never did anything so wrong to Taein to go that far. Then Taein comments that he didn't show enough of the story, throwing a small flashback to show him. The bully didn't even seem to remember, but Taein clearly remembers the sound of mocking laughter while he was being beaten, the smell of his burning uniform, which he took off saying it stank, the taste of the school lunch he threw in the toilet and forced him to eat, the feeling of despair he felt whenever he saw a padlock on his glasses. So Taein asks if he doesn't remember, and the delinquent shouts no, that he never did that. The delinquent admits he told Taein to buy a bun and is very sorry, but he didn't do the rest, and Taein doesn't even wear glasses. Taein asks if the bully was saying he was wrong, and the bully replies that, speaking with that impression, it seemed he really did those things. But Taein says he received his apologies and would forgive him. As a gesture of their future relationship, he would transform him into something the bully likes. The bully thinks of becoming a bodybuilder. Taein activates a shape-shifting ability and shoots at the bully. Smoke fills the place and begins to dissipate. Kim Il-jin is transformed into a hamburger bun. Il-jin asks what the protagonist had done, and Taein comments that it was very cute. Taein says that if he sincerely repented, he would transform him back to normal. Il-jin affirms that he was repentant. At that moment a voice calls him. Yunai asks what he is. The protagonist turns surprised. She says he seemed to be chosen by the gods. While Il-jin begs to return to his original form, Yunai questions if the hamburger was alive, and the protagonist says it was cute. She asks if Taein wasn't scared. The world had changed so drastically, and many people had lost their lives. For some reason there was no one at school, and communication had gone down, so they couldn't call the police. She was afraid of losing her life. She asks how the protagonist could be so happy. Taein calls the girl's name, questioning if she had never seen a webtoon, because they were fun to read, and there was no need to think too much about it. They were the only ones there, because the author was lazy. The girl asks what in the world he was talking about, and the protagonist comments that she was too boring to be the female main character. Yunai is surprised by this, and the protagonist thinks she was the villain, breaking the flow of the chapters. So Taein wonders if he should bring another female character himself. He activates the interdimensional summoning ability, thinking he just needed a better protagonist. That portal begins to glow, blinding everyone there. Yunya asks what that was. The protagonist says he wants to bring the most beautiful and charming woman from all dimensions. Right now all the monsters outside get scared. The smoke begins to dissipate. As Il-jin asks what the pervert had done, Taein was startled by the girl emerging from the smoke. She holds a bloody knife. She faces the protagonist as soon as the smoke clears. Taein was completely without reaction. The girl comments that she had struck Jeremy with her own hands. The protagonist thinks she is the main character of a noble woman who seduces the tyrant, who is supposed to be the villain, takes his life and becomes the villain herself. Her husband was audacious. From the very first moment he called her by name. That was the first time anyone had called her so casually. The heiress of House Liberson, Tane interrupts the explanation, telling her to stop, because no one allowed him to change the genre. You must be Layla, and he knows how important the first 3 chapters are. For a webtoon, if she brings in an outside narrative like this, they will be stuck in the school for the rest of the 3 episodes, and readers will think it's a slow webtoon. The girl continues her explanation without caring, but Tane tells her to stop with those flowery, glittering lines. Layla questions who he is to raise his voice when they don't even know each other, and the protagonist tells her to lower the knife and talk. Tan thinks he doesn't usually read these romance fantasies. The girl questions where she was and why she was dressed like that. A moment ago, she was piercing her husband with that dagger, but the protagonist snaps his fingers and throws the dagger away, telling her to clean the blood with her magic as well. The girl gains a divine beauty, leaving Yumi and Iljin blushing at the sight. Layla asks who he is, and Tyan turns to the side, saying something was coming. Then he activates the defensive barrier, using the system's magic. A monster outside hits the school with its staff, but only manages to strike the barrier. Without any other effect, Yunya screams in fear, and Layla asks what in the world that was. Tyan watches the monster hit several more times. The monster screams in frustration for having no results. The protagonist comments that it was an idiotic monster, perfect for warm-up, thus he flies through the window, using a system limiter for a millionth of his power, with the unranked skill Shock Finger. That blow destroys the giant monster with ease. The girls are impressed by that. Layla comments that it was incredible, and Annie says that monsters and magic shouldn't even be possible. Tan says that as long as it's fun, no one cares, using the D-rank skill Freezing. All those monsters are frozen with immense ease. Protagonist advances using the Stomp skill, then he causes an earthquake, destroying several monsters. Tane sighs deeply, saying that perhaps he got too carried away with so much destruction. Even if he tries to hold back, his power is too high. He immediately becomes happy about it. The system notified him that he had defeated the first monster. An endless horde of monsters advanced towards the protagonist. Tane thought it was a fantasy game, with hunters and portals, the best of all worlds. He then activated flight at maximum speed. In addition to his psionic ability, the monsters were sliced apart. As the protagonist continued to advance relentlessly, he struck down a final dragon-shaped monster, then paused to think and wonder what to do about the portal. Normally, he would have to enter each one and complete it, but he didn't need to bother, so he used his dimensional exile ability. Those monsters were teleported through the portal, which then closed, giving them no chance to retaliate. The protagonist stated that he would simply destroy the portal entirely. With that, the dimensional exile concluded. Tane commented that this should keep Soul safe. For now, teleporting back to school, he found the girls chatting amongst themselves. Layla said he had arrived, and while he was gone, she had been listening to people talk about this world. She had then traveled to the future. The protagonist commented that it wasn't exactly that. He would simply adjust her to fit into this world, using his transform ability. The protagonist said that if she kept that outfit, it would be difficult to draw her, especially after a fight with large monsters. Layla was then transformed into casual clothes. Kim Il-jong became infatuated with the girl. Layla ordered him to bring a cloak or dress immediately, and the protagonist said her hair must be difficult to draw, so he would tie it up. Yunya said that this was something she never wanted to know. That perverts tastes. Tian stated that he should deflect those aggressive words while they were talking among friends, and that he had merely picked something comfortable, considering the entire setup. Perhaps the shorts were a bit much, but Iljin asked him not to change them. The protagonist informed Miss Liberskin that he knew this seemed new, but she could wear it. Yunai asked if he could make any outfit like Chanel or Louis Vuitton, and the protagonist questioned if she was that type of character. Layla interrupted, stating that she was no longer Libershin, but Kleshwach, a noble name, signifying that she had become the princess of the royal family. The protagonist commented that even with her hair tied up, it was still a mess. Layla said that she was no longer worthy of the name Kleshwach, as she had taken the life of her own husband. The protagonist said he was sorry and didn't know the story of her world, but he had no idea what she was talking about. He could tell she had lived a tragic life, however he didn't want the details. And Layla asked what he was talking about. The protagonist surmised she had a terminal illness, and the girl questioned how he knew, but that wasn't all. She probably had an arranged marriage with someone she didn't love. Her husband made a mistake, and they ended up this way. She was falsely accused as a villain, and then this incident happened. At that moment, the girl cried, saying that it was true. Taeyeon said it must have been hard, but she didn't have to live like that anymore. Layla commented, as she had taken the crown prince's life, but the protagonist replied that he attacked first. He activated the Seraphim's blessing on her, and said she did nothing wrong. The girl commented that she had a warming feeling. Taeyeon replied that he had healed every illness in her body, and she was no longer close to losing her life. Now she could live freely in this world. Layla thought that this time she was free, without a powerful father or her most admirable friend. Not even her husband the crown prince. None of them had given her freedom. This man whom she had just met gave her this gift. The girl thanked him tearfully for it. Suddenly the protagonist noticed that he had defeated 33 monsters and earned an achievement. He then said that it was nothing, just the beginning of the story, but the system informed him that the constellations were interested in his achievement. By satisfying the constellations, he could receive sponsorships, unique skills, and item enhancements. The protagonist wondered what that was. With several constellations interested in him, he ordered them all to be blocked. The system refused, questioning how he could refuse such a good opportunity. Taein said that personally, he wasn't a big fan of constellation. He changed the subject with his friends, asking if everyone wanted to join him to save the world. Elsewhere, in the interdimensional council of celestial beings, some constellations gathered. Hujak Arun of Rage asked how he dared to refuse a constellation's favor, saying he had never been so insulted. Amashura, the constellation of games, said it was interesting, and Oishiku replied that perhaps they should teach him a lesson. But Sekai, the king of constellations, told everyone to calm down. Even though he was human, he had ascended the Tower of Challenges and should be respected. Muramu of Despair said it was impossible as he was just a human Damitav and added that he had skipped all the floors. A constellation asked to go to that dimension to speak with him personally. They saw potential to change the order of the universe. They would eliminate the protagonist without hesitation. Back on Earth, Teen said he would distribute all his power. Now they should go forth and defeat monsters at will. But Yunai said it was pointless, wanting to know why she should risk her life. Biljin said that was too much. Teen told them not to worry, as they were his companions, and absolutely would not lose their lives. Yunye disagreed, arguing that with his level, he could take care of everyone by himself, but the protagonist complained that she would keep saying such things. Even with him being the protagonist, if he destroyed everything alone, it wouldn't be fun. Then a monster charged at him. The protagonist struck the monster and killed it in one blow, saying that the stronger the protagonist, the more interesting the stories of the characters around him must be. Yunya said she didn't understand anything he was saying, but Layla said she did. So they had to kill monsters to save the world. She had already taken her husband's life. Now she felt she could kill anything. She turned towards a monster, and the protagonist thought that his goal was to make this interesting. For now he would form his party. The role he had chosen for Layla, the girl activated her malice, unleashed skill, and made several cuts with her dagger. That monster was cut into hundreds of pieces. Layla celebrated the feeling of liberation, being the group's assassin dagger. Yunya asked why she was like that, and the protagonist said he had achieved a clear character concept. The girl commented that it was an emotion she had never felt before in her life. While another monster approached from behind, quickly advancing to attack her, some tentacles grabbed her. Biljin shouted for them to save their princess, and Eni suggested they do it quickly. Amberter advanced, and the protagonist cheered. He thought about his role. Biljin concentrated and landed a strong headbutt on the creature, but nothing happened, and he asked why his skill was so trivial. Being just a mascot, he shouted for the protagonist to give him something cool too, and Layla thanked Amberter. Biljin turned, saying it was nothing at all. Teen said that was fun and quickly cut the creature. Yunya was completely shocked by all of this. Tien said that here she should show her skill, but Yunya said she didn't want to and couldn't. He was incredibly strong and could go back in time, besides having been chosen by the gods alone, so he could turn things back. Before the world became like this, everyone who lived daily in this world was on the verge of losing their lives, but his fun seemed to be more important. Tae-in confirmed this immediately, saying that she would understand someday too. In this world, having fun was the most important thing. Yunya said the atmosphere suddenly changed. Protagonist shouted that there was a bird monster flying there. Yunya was supposed to defeat it with magic. The girl swung her staff from side to side, holding it with extreme force, and threw the monster far away. Everyone was impressed. Yunai was a powerful warrior. Biljin commented that she looked like a baseball player. Yunai replied that she had trained a bit when she was young, and Tain complained about not knowing that, until Tain noticed something on his back. He turned to defend against a spell, wondering what that was coming from monsters. A man approaches, saying it was impressive for someone to be able to interfere with his strong Che, especially with bare hands. Tain is surprised to recognize him. The man says he is surprised to see an unknown master, and Aeneas. Tain reveals that he was the heavenly demon. Chiama questions how he knew his true identity, and Tain replies that he was a big fan. Anya asks how the pervert knew who he was. Tain tells Yunya to search for Chinma's webtoon. He was an iconic character in the martial arts genre, always portrayed as the absolute villain. Chinma comments that Tain talks too much. and that the tremendous energy coming from the east could have been his doing. Tian asks if he was referring to the previous attack, when the shockwave hit the eastern Korean peninsula. Shinma confirms it, and asks the reason for the question. Shinma explains that over the centuries, the world's martial arts had deteriorated and humans had become a weak existence. He was also losing interest in the peaceful world, so heaven and earth were being remade. Monsters began to appear. Chan was happy when monsters fell from the sky. He experienced a chaos he had never experienced before. When he was about to be fully immersed in chaos, suddenly an immense energy came rushing from the east. Shinma tries to defend himself, saying it was dangerous, and uses the heavenly demon god's extreme seal. That burst of attack hits Taein, who manages to dissipate it. Shinma was impressed by this destructive power, and it didn't end there. Seeing that everything was returning to normal, Shinma had witnessed an inexplicable phenomenon of reversing time and restoring everything that had been destroyed. This was without a doubt the work of an absolute master. His instincts made him move, walking on water to cross continents and seas, and then he arrived there personally. Nunai, setting aside the fact that he crossed the South China Island, asks how a Chinese person could speak Korean so well. Taein complains that she was making sense. Shinma calls out to the unknown master from the east, saying he would take his life now. Taein shouts that it was very cool, as it was the real heavenly demon. Shinma laughs, saying they should have some fun. The girls think that maybe he didn't want to do that. Cheonma prepares his demonic energy, using the heavenly dragon palm against Taein. That strike causes an immense explosion, but Taein appears behind him, saying it was a very slow attack. Cheonma turns around, wanting to know what had happened. Taein says he always wanted to do that, it behind an enemy, and say too slow in a deep voice. He had awakened and become stronger, and wanted to know how strong Cheonma was, because that technique was very cool. Chinna apologizes for not understanding that, and he turns away, saying he had lost interest and preferred to go hunt monsters ahead. It was a waste of time to come all the way here. Biljin says those were just excuses because Chinma's technique didn't work. Chinna wondered if that country was Korea, as the thought of a mere weakling taking care of it left him feeling hopeless. But Teen called out to the celestial demon, warning him that he had crossed the line. He didn't care about anything, but it wasn't just Korea, it was the Republic of Korea. Chinmat immediately recoiled after that, saying it was impossible and that he couldn't even sense Teen's presence, so he tried to launch a palm attack against Teen. Teen merely watched the energy coming his way. Teen blocked the attack with a stone, without any difficulty, but Cheonma trapped him with more demonic energy. Meanwhile, Ani called out to him. The celestial demon mused that this martial art compressed all of space T and moved, breaking the prison, and commented that it was very refreshing. Chinma was surprised. The protagonist replied that it was annoying, but still very cool. Teen told him to become his companion now. Everyone was surprised by the proposal. Chinma said it was an absolute skill, perfected over centuries, but not a single move had worked. He was the number one under the heavens, and refused to lose to a brat like Taein. Taein questioned him about that title. He said he just thought of something fun. Then Taein called Chinma, saying that he would no longer be able to live a normal life, and activated his transformation ability. Biljin was surprised, asking what Taein was going to do. The smoke hit Cheonma, and he questioned what trick that was. He noticed that his voice and appearance had become feminine. Everyone in the group was surprised. Taein said that Cheonma was no longer the strongest man under the heavens, but rather the woman. Cheonma asked what that bastard had done to her. Yinya shouted that Taein was truly perverted, and the protagonist complained. Changing the gender of a charming character for fun was a very old creative element, but for some reason it had become rare. Yinya tried to say something, but the protagonist told her to shut up and not speak more than 3 lines. Chinma advanced towards the protagonist, telling him to change her back to normal, but Taein merely hit Cheonma on the head. He said it had been a long time since she was hit, and that she had always been at the top in that form, so if she acted like that again, he would hit harder. Anya complained that he said such things while hitting and threatening a woman, and that he was a very bad guy. The protagonist commented that he had gained another team member now. Chinma merely questioned if she couldn't return to normal, being the group's nun. Taein said that everyone should act gently and hunt some monsters around there. He commented that this was very easy and used his teleportation ability, announcing that he would now save the world. The girls wondered what they should do. At the same time, in Washington, United States, in the White House emergency room, they discussed that there was no time to debate the disaster, and that humanity would be extinct. They needed a quick decision. The president questioned if they should use nuclear bombs, even if it meant targeting their own territory. Then the Secretary of Defense said with a heavy heart that even if they used all their equipment, be it conventional, mechanical, chemical, or biological, Once the gate was open, they couldn't stop the number of monsters. The president slammed the table, cursing the entire situation. He said he wished at least the bombs would take care of the gates, but Titan interrupted him, saying he would handle it. The president questioned who he was, and the protagonist greeted him. He said he was the pervert from Korea, and the savior of humanity. Everyone at the table fell silent, but they shouted asking how he got there, and pointed their weapons. Titan, however, told them to listen. One of the men ordered him to put his hands on his head, or he would shoot, and the protagonist complained that it was painful. The other shouted that he had appeared out of nowhere, and was definitely a monster, but the president told them to wait. Shots were fired at the protagonist, but the security guards were left without a reaction. He stopped all the bullets just by moving his hand forward. Then he laughed, saying that now with this thing, they would have to trust him entirely. He told them to get rid of all the nuclear equipment they possessed. The president exclaimed that this wasn't something they could simply do. Beyond used his mass manipulation ability to take control of everyone in the room. Those people became zombies, and the president used the phone. He ordered the command to be spread to NASA, and all units with code 389. They must launch all nuclear equipment immediately. The people were afraid of the order, but merely accepted that the missiles were fired, with the exact number of warheads being unknown. But the number launched at that moment was approximately 8,000 units. The protagonist decided to act and activated the invisible hand ability. He moved an immense palm to hold the weapons, then he used the replicate ability. Thus all the missiles came under his control. Taein ordered every missile to be brought, leaving none out, and then commanded them all to be launched towards the portal. The nuclear weapons began to fly towards the portal. Taein celebrated with a victorious expression. At the same time in Moscow at the Supreme Council, people commented that the United States had launched all its nuclear weapons and needed to retaliate, but Taein appeared, saying it wasn't necessary. Everyone fired in his direction, but he blocked them once again. The security guards asked what had happened. Back in the United States, the secretary reported that all portals had been cleared. Taein appeared, saying he had saved the world, and thanked them for trusting him and launching all the bombs. The president wondered what he had done, but he explained that the nuclear bombs had no effect on reality, and that the portals had disappeared. Everyone thanked the Korean hero, and Taein warned that there were still monsters outside, so they should do their best. Using his teleport ability, he vanished, wishing the United States good luck in Korea. Shinma knocked down a monster with her foot. He said she was doing well. The girls noticed he was there, and Yunai asked if he had any idea how many times they had come close to losing their life. Now the missiles had come and exploded the portal. Wanting to know if he was the one who did it, Taein replied yes, and that Il-jin was working well. But now, they needed someone to take on the role of a tank. An explosion occurred behind them. The girls shielded themselves from the dust. That followed that Constellation appeared, stating that the actions of the Transcendent of Earth had shaken the order of the universe. Kanu, Doranai of Justice, would judge him in the name of justice. The group was surprised, but Taein merely thought he had found his tank. Chanma said she could feel the energy of a true master, and he told her to stay there. Then he called the system, questioning what it had said about divine seats, but he remembered the system had blocked all discussion about constellations, saying that this might have been a misunderstanding, and that he didn't hate constellations, but was merely busy with the monsters that had invaded Earth. Eudorina replied that this was the problem, as humanity had not sacrificed enough. All his fault. Taein questioned, hadn't humanity been sacrificed? The fact that portals opened and filled with monsters, in addition to countless people losing their lives, was all the work of those constellations. Eudorina confirmed, and the system announced that world explanation was on its way. Every living being in the universe produces an energy that constellations need to survive, which they call negentropy. So they create them. The more intelligent and stronger the species, the more negentropy they can obtain from them. To make them stronger, they create tests. And some species become more powerful, thus providing much more negentropy, or else they are extinguished, becoming material for the birth of better species. But this time he overrode the tutorial on his own, and humanity lost the chance to grow as a whole. The constellations wanted to observe the progress, but since he blocked them, there had been many discussions. She personally manifested the chance to judge him. Taein replies that it's ridiculous. She just threw out an explanation like that, and it's absurd. Suddenly, it turned into something out of science fiction, and Anya wonders what on earth he's talking about. The protagonist calls Il-jin and tells him to summarize her explanation in 3 lines. Amberter says that for those who skip the explanation, they can start here. The constellations drain energy, open portals to cause chaos, but the protagonist interfered and angered them. Taein says that after hearing all this, these guys are truly insane. Layla steps forward saying she cannot forgive them, but Shima asks her to wait. warning that they are not on a level to interfere. Tien activates his Void Emergency ability. He reconfigures it into the shape of a sword. Made of space, he advances towards Yurina, telling her to take this. Tien truly dislikes these constellation matters, thus his sword class ability activates, unleashing dozens of special slashes against Yudorina. She prepares to defend with her sword and blocks easily. Tien thinks that his sword erases the existence of everything in its path, but Yudorina blocked it so easily. The constellation then calls the Transcendent of Earth, saying that he was no match for her. The protagonist lands on the ground and asks if that was really all. Then he activates his Planetary Explosion ability. That strike illuminates Yudorina's face, surpassing the atmosphere and erasing everything in front of Tien. But Yudorina merely blocks and says it wasn't bad at all. The protagonist decides he would do better. Using multicast and create a crisis, he needs to counterattack. He tells the girl to advance now, as they need to create a dopamine fuel action scene together. Suddenly, Tien's hand vanishes. The protagonist notices it in a second. Yudorina merely tells Tien to accept her judgment. Peacefully, Tien screams in pain. His hand gone. Then he activates his time reversal ability, saying that it doesn't matter, as he will just go back in time as many times as needed. He just needs to go back until he's ready. He notices that Yudorina did not remain frozen in time. She explains that constellations and cosmic beings are not affected by distortions of time and space, returning to the moment where Chen Ma said he was a true master. Tien tells them to calm down, as this person was very strong. He wonders what the author was thinking to add a character like this. Yudorina says she no longer wants to test his patience and that Tien must accept her judgment. The protagonist questions what judgment she was speaking of. Yudorina manifests something in her hand, showing it was a scale of justice, which Tien recognizes. She explains that this scale places values on each side, and the laws of the universe calculate them. The protagonist becomes frustrated with the explanations. So Yudorina said she would directly show him the benefit his existence brought to the universe, and the threat he posed to the universal order. She wondered which would weigh more. Tien asked which side represented what. Yudorina looked at the scales, tipped towards the side of the threat. She warned that Tien was a problem for the universal order. The judgment of the scales of justice was an absolute truth, so according to it, she would suppress him. Protagonist began to think for a moment, then he broke into a smile, saying that these scales could judge any problem, and that he had a suggestion. Yudorina confirmed it as from a cosmic perspective, human matters were trivial. The protagonist said that before she left, she should resolve one of humanity's greatest problems by weighing it on the scales. The constellation replied that she could not ignore such a request, and wanted to know what value he wished to measure. Yunia questioned what Tien was doing in this situation, and the protagonist asked her not to worry, as it was fun. He couldn't resist the universal balancing game, and he asked which manhwa was more fun, the stick reinforced 99 times, or what can I do alone. Yudorina was surprised by the question. Along with the other girls, even Iljan hadn't understood. Yudorina asked what he had said. Tien repeated, wanting to know which of the two manhwas was more fun. And he asked what those things were. And the protagonist asked if she didn't know these webtoons. He said she should sell her brain to him, but the girl replied that there was no way to sell that. The protagonist replied that he could just erase his own memory with some kind of ability. Iljan told the constellation to ignore Tien, as he was too obsessed with webtoons, but Yudorina didn't know what that was. The protagonist explained that it was the most fun thing humans had invented, and the constellation replied that they did not judge trivial emotions, like fun. Tien responded that for a constellation, he didn't seem to know anything about this world, as there was nothing more important than fun anyway. He would simplify it to her level. For a second, Yudorina wondered why his mood had changed so suddenly. The protagonist continued, saying that she was the constellation of justice, and maintained the universal order, and Yudorina confirmed for the consequences. If the universal order were broken, would be beyond anyone's predictions. Tien said that then by her own logic, this was merely sacrificing him for consequences she could not foresee. Yudorina was left without a response. The protagonist continued, saying that she was about to argue that small sacrifices for the greater good were inevitable from a cosmic perspective. Talking about the universal order itself was biased, especially on the scales of judgment. This might be fairer from a cosmic point of view, but from a human perspective it was entirely unjust. Yudorina replied that he was saying he was more important than the universe itself. Tien explained that they questioned these scales because forcing him to sacrifice himself, from a cosmic perspective, was a matter of just versus unjust, so they should think about it. The girl created the two weights on the scales, Then the scales began to tip towards the side of what was unjust. Yunya asked what had just happened. Protagonist replied that the result was very obvious. The girl was completely surprised by this. Tane questioned if she still intended to restrict him, claiming he was a threat to the universal order. Yajurina replied that he was correct and understood that it was very unfair to him. Layla says that Mr. Tane is very intelligent. Yuna says she still didn't understand what was happening. The protagonist replies that it means justice can change depending on one's perspective. He then asks if he can make a suggestion to the constellation of justice. If she is worried about breaking the universal order, she can keep an eye on him, staying by his side. He never planned to meddle with the order. He only got angry when he learned that the constellations attack humanity and helping the weak was her duty. Yuduranai says that this is incredibly rational and a very intelligent point, and that she would promise to stay by his side. Shinma thinks that he turned a cosmic being into an ally. With just his charisma, Taiyan says he still has one more thing. He wants to know if she thinks it was fair for the constellation to open portals on Earth and take humanity's lives. Yujirina gapes for a few seconds, but then looks down. She creates two spheres and weighs them on the scale where the human side tips, indicating it is correct. Yujirina remains silent and just sighs. The protagonist gets annoyed by this. She begins to fly upwards, heading out of planet Earth, and she uses magic to clear all the invasions in one world. An elephant chases humans to exterminate them, but suddenly it stops and those humans turn around. That monster had disappeared, along with monsters from other places on the planet. Yujirini finishes conjuring her magic, using sacred purification. Lilila notices a light that blinds everyone on planet Earth. Sanma comments that all the demonic energy had disappeared. All of a sudden, the protagonist says that it was to be expected from a constellation. This was one of the great moments of that chapter. Yudaranai says she felt manipulated, but the protagonist dismisses it. He thinks that protecting Earth was just a slice of the pie. And moreover, he gained an incredible person to join his group. As Yuduranai changed her clothes, everyone blushes at that attire. Taiyan asks what she was doing. Yuduranai says she just took off her armor, since she's not in combat. The protagonist tells her to put something on and uses transformation magic, creating a casual outfit for her while thinking she was beautiful. Yuduranai wonders why she should wear something with zero defense and starts taking off her shirt, but the protagonist tells her to keep her clothes on, as she needs to stay dressed. Yudurini complains that humans are incomprehensible. The system appears to Taiyan calling him Mr. Pervert because the other constellations got angrier, and are saying that even the constellation of justice had been changed. Taiyan complains that the other constellations should be angry, and that he has to go crush them, but the system says that before that, Tower Master wants to meet him personally. Yuduranai says there were many discussions about the Tower Master being responsible for the situation. For offering a random ability to a bad person, the system says it would escort him to the dimension of eternal night. Taiyan warns that in that case, he will talk a bit with them. He is transferred while telling the system to wait because he finally made great companions and it would be a waste to leave them alone. Shinma says they were captured by his unilateral decisions. Layla asks where they are going. Taiyan pretends the system was initiating the transfer on its own. Then he tells the system to hurry. With the teleport to the dimension of eternal night being initiated, the light hits the group and makes them disappear. From there the group begins to be carried by the light, reaching a castle immediately after. Yuna asks where they were. Biljan says he feels dizzy. Taiyan says that this must be the top of the testing tower, but the Tower Master welcomes the constellation of justice. He said it was an honor to have such a guest in that dilapidated place. He introduced himself as Sugushi Nujo, the Tower Master, and said it had been a long time since he had seen such a sight. He also noticed the companions who had come along, questioning how insects like them dared to set foot in that sacred place, for he would take their lives and break their body. Terrifying energy emanated from him, frightening the entire group. Anna called for her mother, while Iljan murmured that she just wanted to eat a hamburger bun before losing her life. Tian smiled, saying that this was it, for this was the first boss they would face as a complete team. That the protagonist saw it as if it were a game fight, so he smiled, saying that this would be a lot of fun. Layla asked if he was thinking of fighting that thing, and Yuna replied that she wanted to go home. The protagonist told them not to worry, because if they worked together they would succeed. Until Sugushi grabbed him, asking how he dared to step on top of the tower without even climbing all the floors. Ian wondered if he was in a position to be beaten. Again Sugushi slammed him to the ground, wanting to know how much he planned to insult him for. He would tell him what his problem was. He was ignorant, arrogant, cunning, selfish, and stubborn, besides being irresponsible, vulgar, and all sorts of bad things. Tien wondered how much longer he would keep complaining. Sugushi said that above all, he only thought of himself hitting him with energy. That shock began to hurt the protagonist. Pain groaned in pain from all that damage. Tsukushi said he would make him pay for the years of pain he should have experienced, and that he would make sure of it. The girls on the team were shocked by that. The Tower Master said he was sorry for the others who found him now, for they would lose their lives. Until Cheon Ma warned that he would be the one to go to hell. She appeared behind the Tower Master, using her celestial demon destruction seal. The blow impacted Tsukushi, but he replied that it might seem unfair. Repelling the blow, he said that even though she was not a transcendent, she was able to withstand it. It was too bad, and she should curse the pervert who brought her to her own grave. I felt sorry for Yudo in that. As she had seen a deplorable appearance, the constellation argued that this was not the right way to treat a human who cleared the tower according to the imposed rules. Tsukushi replied that he was a being who served the constellations. Therefore, all of them, including Wrath, found the existence of that man uncomfortable, and he was merely fulfilling his responsibility. The protagonist wondered about the constellation of Wrath. Yudo said he had a fair point. At that moment, everyone except her was thinking the same thing, that this would be their last day. But Tien said that they definitely would not lose their lives. He broke free from Tsukushi's palm. The Tower Master said there was no way that could be happening. Wanting to know how he managed to escape his authority, the protagonist replied that he was ignorant and arrogant in this type of battle story. It was natural for the protagonist to counterattack after taking a few blows, and he used his power on Cheon Ma. She asked what on earth that was, and the protagonist told her not to forget that feeling she experienced. For when she felt she was close to losing her life, it meant that he absolutely would not lose, especially if they saw it written in red. Yudo thought it was incredible for a mere human to face the Tower Master effortlessly. Tsukushi said he admitted to underestimating him, but he was wrong about one thing: his companions would definitely lose their lives. He expanded his power towards them. The protagonist parried the blow with his energy, saying it was cunning to target his allies first. Tsukushi wondered how he had gotten so strong, and that he was at least 10,000 times more powerful. The protagonist thought he finally got to say that. He said he was only using 1/millionth of his power previously against the monster that was banging on the school window. The protagonist had gotten excited about awakening and started to introduce himself. Then he put a limit on his own strength. System notified that his limit was released to 100. Belgian thought he was able to send continents far away, but he felt weak fighting Yudo. Tien says he is sorry, but this guy was stronger than he thought, so he could not save their screen time. He activates the shock hit ability and pierces Tsukushi twice. The Tower Master thinks this is impossible, but the protagonist warns that Tsukushi's selfishness and stubbornness would end there. The Tower Master shouts to Miss Yujiri that this is not right, because her power comes from him, but she should not be able to surpass him. Then he begs them to save him, but Tien strikes the Tower Master's face, saying that he was irresponsible. He should clean up his own mess, but saying that made him an annoying bastard too. While Tsukushi screams in pain, Tsukushi says that if he is swept away like this, chaos would swallow the tower and the dimension. The order of the universe would break, but the protagonist cuts him in half, saying that this was annoying. Tsukushi spits blood and begins to disappear, warning that Tien would regret this. But the protagonist says that he defeated a super strong boss. Yudo wonders how Tien defeated a cosmic entity at such speed, the point where she could not even intervene. The protagonist apologizes, as all of them must have been worried. His friends shout that he was irresponsible, as they almost lost their lives. But Tien tells them to wait a second, because he did not get to talk about the selfishness part. This would torment him forever. And the girls think he is a selfish bastard. But the protagonist looks at the system. The system had warned that he completed the reward for defeating the first cosmic entity, and can now ascend. Tien suggests that it was like a power upgrade that can increase his fighting capacity, and it seems fun. He wants to know how many phases are left. Yudo questions if Tien realizes what he had just done. By taking the Tower Master's life, he became an enemy of all constellations. The protagonist questions if he should lose his life, as Tsukushi says, but Yudo replies no. Then Tien responds that it does not matter if all the constellations are against him, because he got Yudo as an ally. Yudo questions since when that would be, and the protagonist changes this subject because he wants to find the constellation of Wrath that the Tower Master mentioned before. Yudo questions if Tien was thinking of fighting the constellation of Wrath, but the protagonist denies it, as he just wants to try his luck with dialogues. The girl says that then it was fine, and Junior reflects that he is just an idiot. Diljin says that this is her tie-in and has no doubt that he protects universal peace alongside the constellation of justice, and that they have to go home. The light hits the group once more and begins to teleport them out of the tower. This time, Tien and Yudorinai are not affected by space-time. Appearing in a completely different place, the protagonist asks where they were, and Yudorinai recognizes the place, telling him that it was the room of the constellation of Wrath. Yujikiruna the girls comment that it was very hot, and that they were in the center of a volcano. Yunya asks why Tien keeps bringing them everywhere. The protagonist replies that having them around gives him strength, and the girls tell him to cut that strange talk. However, only Layla believes it, and Yunya asks why she was falling for it. Yujikaruna begins to laugh hysterically, and makes everyone impressed. Yujirina takes her armor back. Yujikaruna says they were bold for bringing these insects into his domain. Yujikaruna falls to the ground, exploding everything in his path. Yujikaruna strikes Yudorina's sword, saying she was an insolent fool. The girl tries to resist and calls Hajikaruna's name. That constellation replies that he had not seen her in a long time, until he was hit by a fist. The protagonist punches him, telling him not to touch his friends. All his colleagues are impressed by this. Yujirinai questions what happened to him. Who is talking about this? Tien says she does not need to thank him, because he was trying to save her. Since Yujikaruna tried to resist, the girl says that Yujikaruna just cannot control his anger, and that he was born with a tendency to use violence. All the time Hajikaruna appears somewhere, and asks if that is the designated planet. It was a beautiful scenery that would awaken his admiration, and from now on would be his favorite, but he begins to feel a rage, and says that he only discovered this beautiful planet. Now he slams the ground with all his strength, destroying the world from one side to the other. Hojikaruna complains that he always gets this way, and that he was very angry. The protagonist comments that Hojikaruna is just a stupid person. Yujikaruna asks how an insect dares to lay a hand on him. The lava of the territory begins to expand. Yudorina says they are in trouble, because this dimension is integrated with Yujikaruna. If his anger explodes, the crater there will explode too. The lava was formed by the obsidian of Wrath, and any material is incinerated. But Tien merely questions if they will be in trouble if the lava rises. In that case, Tien just needs to calm Yujikaruna, quickly activating his absolute zero magic. Yujikaruna manages to be frozen by Tien, but he breaks free from the ice soon after. Yujirina says it is useless, because Yujikaruna is the very form of Wrath, and they cannot stop him. But Tien shouts that there were too many explanations. Tien clashes his fist with Yujikaruna's. Tien thinks this constellation is strong, and on a completely different level from the tower master he fought before. Yujikaruna asks what that freezing sensation was, and likes it, but he was still angry. Tien doesn't understand what Yujikaruna is talking about, but the system activates the empathy skill. The two quickly connect. Yujikaruna wonders what this is. Yudorinai tells Tien to stop connecting with Hajikaruna's emotions, but Tien replies that it was fine, and he would try to calm Hajikaruna while they were connected. Hajikaruna says he's feeling things in his mind he's never seen before, and it's good, but he's getting angry. Yudorinai says this is bad, as Tien will be consumed by the rage. Junya questions what's wrong with him. Taeyong breaks free, saying this didn't feel right, but Taeyong apologizes for blocking Huikaruna's messages and hitting him first, but he wants some way to resolve it just by talking. However, Hajikaruna's fist flies towards Tien's face. Hajikaruna says Tien talks too much for a failure. Tien wonders about being a failure. Hujikaruna grabs Tien by the neck, saying his nigentropy value was too low, and that was the reason he was trying to annihilate and reset him. Yujirinai holds Hujikaruna, asking if the portal didn't open to test humanity, but rather to exterminate them. Hujikaruna says he was right. Tien complains that this is annoying. They should stop with these explanations, as it would be too much for the reader's ears. Thus Tien activates stage 1 of Ascension. Hujikaruna is thrown back with the Planet Buster skill. Tien says this meant nothing to Hujikaruna, for he would become the protagonist of the best webtoon of all time. Ujigaruma flies through the air, wondering how an insect possessed so much power to rival him who surpassed 10 stars. Tien looks at himself in a mirror, saying his hair and eyes had changed, and this was the first purple stage. Hojikaruna advances towards the planet, unleashing a roar that sounded like a meteor, shouting that he would take Tien's life today. Tien complains about all these exclamations. Tien strikes his fist into Hujikaruna while telling him to cut it out. Hujikaruna thinks there was no way and blocks the attack, as he had given his all and achieved nothing. Tien advances once more, repeatedly telling Hujikaruna to cut out all the exclamations, while destroying parts of his body. Furthermore, Hajikaruna should just fall quietly, because this was supposed to be fun. Thus Tien throws him away. Hachikaruma loses consciousness and falls to the ground near the protagonists. Yudoin I think that a constellation lost its life at human hands. This was a collapse in the cosmic order. Hachikaruma rises from the ground, laughing because this was fun, and he should have shown it earlier. Tain wonders if it was already a phase 2. And knows that the villain's laughter in this situation was not good. Hachikaruna says it seemed all of Tain's companions were already lifeless. Tain turns around telling him not to mention it. He sees the girls falling on the ground due to the immense heat. Eudoria says that Hojikaruna's rage increases the heat and makes him stronger. Hojikaruna asks why justice is wasting its time with these insects, as they will be extinct soon. Tain reflects Hojikaruna's aura, saying he was just spouting nonsense. Hachikaruna warns that Tain cannot stop the end of humanity. He has already set his arrangements in motion. He will spread his rage virus across the entire planet. Tain questions what Hachikaruna was talking about. Hachikaruna replies that from now on, every living being on Earth will be infected. They will lose their minds and destroy each other, until nothing remains. Tain becomes even more irritated. He shouts Hachikaruna's name with all his might. Yudo and I said the volcano was erupting, but then they needed to get out of there. Using teleportation magic, Tain prepared his fists to strike Hojikaruna one more time, but he was already being teleported. That light ascended in the volcano's dimension, which erupted the next moment. On the way, Tain cursed Hojikaruna. Tain warned that they needed to go to Earth to stop the rabies virus, and Yujiri and I replied that she was already heading there. Tain thought that the test imposed on humanity was not a fair chance, but rather a one-sided defeat. He questioned if that was truly justice. Light emanated in the sky, and a protagonist appeared on Earth. Tain healed his companions and asked if they were alright, but he felt very sorry as it was all his fault, until he noticed a human infected with rabies beside him. Tain easily dodged the bite, wondering what on earth was happening. Another 100 zombies advanced towards the protagonists. Tain thought that the first test from the constellation of Wrath was a zombie apocalypse. He reflected, humans are a purposeful life form that explores the world around them biologically. They are animals belonging to the order of primates in the hominidae family, characterized by high intelligence, tool use, and language. They are social animals that create complex societal structures for interaction. If humanity loses its intelligence and all society collapses, they could no longer be called humans. A new name for them would be zombie. And so due to the rabies virus, humanity had transformed into zombies. The girls wondered what he was talking about. Some zombies advanced towards Unite, but Tain positioned himself in front of her. He said that this shouldn't be happening, and activated his electric current ability. The zombies began to be electrocuted and panicked. Tain said that this was how one dealt with zombies, making them return to normal. Then he asked if Yenny was alright. The girl asked what on earth he was doing, and if he thought this was all a game. Tain told her not to start that again, with ridiculous explanations, but she slapped Tain's face, injuring him. Then she questioned if he was out of his mind, as he should have an idea of how many times they had almost lost their lives. Being near him, Tain said he always wanted to save her, but the girl complained that he shouldn't have brought them to a place like this in the first place in hell before they were burning, thinking they didn't want to lose their lives pathetically without even seeing their parents' faces. Then she questioned if he had any idea how horrible that was, since he wouldn't want to experience something like that. If it was all for fun, he could go to hell with it. They were just tools to prove his abilities, and everything would be resolved if he did it alone or saved them. She questioned if this was his idea of companion, because he had taken people's lives without even thinking, and that shouldn't be fun either. Tain said that's how zombie stories were. An unnice scream, questioning what on earth he was talking about, because he said they were infected by some kind of virus, and that means they can be cured. Then she told Tain to save everyone. Tain remained silent for a few seconds. He questioned, do you think I'm crazy enough to take the lives of all these people? I understood all of this because I only paralyzed them with an electric shock, and they will be cured if treated. But Tain didn't want to be criticized for always using the same pattern, since he always defeats any enemy that appears. The girls wondered what the hell Tain was talking about. Tain told Bunny not to worry, because no matter how annoying it was, he wouldn't go any further, until Bunny warned him about a zombie behind him. Tain turned around and said that the zombie had startled him with that bite. Then he used magic to trap it in the air. He commented that he had been truly startled, yet wondered if the protagonist would turn into a zombie. But Tain told her not to worry, assuring her it was just a small virus. Tain then used his splendid healing ability, but noticed the wound wasn't regenerating. He wondered what could be happening and tried to use the Seraphim's blessing, but again it had no effect. Yujiranai stated there was no choice. If the virus possessed the power of the constellations, she couldn't interfere, and he should sever his arm before he was consumed by rage. The protagonist questioned what she was talking about. As he was already feeling rage, Rinai activated her sword ability. But the protagonist pleaded with her not to. He thought he was supposed to be the protagonist, but this didn't even make sense, simply because he was too strong. It was difficult to advance the story, and this felt like a forced balancing act to fix things. Then he roared that he was filled with immense rage, and the other zombies were drawn to his call. Midori warned that she regretted him becoming like this, but Shinma interrupted. Pleading with her not to take his life, Shinma stated she needed to turn him back to normal. First, and Iljin agreed. Yahello warned that the zombies were approaching, and Rinai told Cheama to step aside for the sake of cosmic order. Cheama prepared to confront them, but Yunya interjected, saying there was no time for that. They needed to get to a safe place before the pervert transformed even further. Iljin asked how they could reach another location with such a zombie horde, but Yunya assured them it would be fine. She then asked if Rinai could help them get to safety. The zombies continued to close in. The protagonists then stopped at the school Rinai. Trapped Tai in a chair, using her ethereal prison. The girls wondered what to do. Having secured him as they intended, Layla expressed her sympathy for Tai-in, reasoning that if they took Karuma's life now, the virus should also disappear. Rinai replied that it was impossible, since they were protected by the cosmic order. Constellations could not simply lose their lives. There was, however, a way to annihilate them. Cheama observed Tai-in, noting his delirious state, and declared she could resolve it with acupuncture. She then touched several vital points on Tai-in. Tai-in spat out a significant amount of blood, leaving Cheama bewildered. Iljin remarked that Tai-in was a complete mess. Rinai questioned if they truly believed the power of a constellation could be resolved with such tricks, yet Tai-in claimed he felt alive. As the blood flow in his brain was improving, Rinai was surprised by this, and Shinma boasted. Layla urged Tai-in to regain his senses, but he replied that he had no time and would lose his mind again. He wondered what the point was of creating a protagonist like this, unable to use any of his abilities. He then began to ponder the author's intention, until he suddenly realized something. He declared that he understood what the next episode would entail, and warned that he would lose his life in an apocalypse manhwa. Another protagonist shouted for everyone to go ahead. First, a blonde girl complained that they had promised to stay together until the end. The green-haired young man said she was mistaken, as he had been bitten earlier. He apologized profusely and told her to be careful. The girl denied it, and the manhwa chapter ended. Tai-in cried, remarking that even though the sacrifice was obvious, tears still welled up. He decided to leave a 10-star rating and a comment, stating that such altruism and spirit of sacrifice couldn't even be taught in schools. He then continued eating his instant noodles. Back in the present, Tai-in believed he could do it, and declared that before he fully transformed, he would sacrifice himself for everyone. The girls questioned his statement. Tai-in continued, explaining it was the protagonist's end before he turned into a zombie, but Layla called out to him. She questioned why he would sacrifice himself when surrounded by several strong individuals. Tai-in tried to respond, but Yunya interjected, saying he was doing it again. He needed to stop trying to sacrifice himself, as they weren't helpless fools who couldn't do anything without assistance. Tai-in thought it wasn't a proper plot development. Upon reflection, it was true. They were strong enough that the zombies weren't particularly frightening. Since all of humanity was infected, there was no thrill in meeting new survivors. The goal was to defeat the zombies. They should agree to end everyone's lives. He needed to grasp the episode's direction before losing his mind again. Layla began to feel hunger, and Shinma mentioned she hadn't eaten all day. Rinai also admitted to being hungry in their current situation, but then everyone started looking at Iljin. He shouted at them not to do that to him. Shinma ordered him to sacrifice himself as emergency food, but Iljin pleaded with them not to come closer. He told them to wait a moment and follow him. Shinma said she understood, and Iljin then urged them to look. There was enough hamburger bread for everyone to eat. Yunya asked how they could possibly eat that. Mas simply suggested they open it and eat, and Yunya commented that for some reason, the hamburger came out halfway. Layla questioned if Iljin would forgive them for eating his friends. But the hamburger replied that they were not his friends, so the three girls ate the hamburger. For those who came from a medieval, European, and ancient Chinese context, the taste of Korean food, developed by a major corporation, was addictively delicious. Inside the room, Rinai asks how Tai-in is doing. Tai-in thanks her for restraining him. Rinai replies that there is no need for thanks, and that he shouldn't have gone to see Karuma, as he will now suffer until he loses his life. The protagonist wonders what he should do. The constellation says she wouldn't let him become like this, because what they witnessed due to the constellations wasn't fair, and she wants to correct it. Tai-in thanks her for realizing that. Yudorin says she can endure this a little longer, but there must be a way to resolve the situation, and he has valuable companions who would help him with it. The girls enter, commenting that the hamburger was delicious, and that it would be better if it were microwave. The two remain silent in the room, but Taein becomes enraged, shouting that these things were frustrating. Yudorin suppresses him, warning that they would lose their sanity again, and that the resistance was intensifying. Shinma says there seems to be no hope, but she needs this guy to return to her original form. Since he made her stay in this state, her abilities aren't the same, and as her body changed, it was difficult to control the energy flow, until Shinma notices something from afar. She warns that she can feel the energy of a nearby house, the energy of someone who hadn't been consumed by rage. Eudorius says it was impossible, as all living beings had been infected by the rage virus. Her sensibility had never failed. Shinma walks to the window, saying that Eudorino was incorrect, because there was a perfect human coming from 2 kilometers away in their direction, and if Eudorini listened carefully, she could even hear her breathing. Eudorini begins to sense, and soon wonders what that presence was. Layla questions what Shinma said about there being other survivors outside, and Yunai says that the infected are also alive. Eudorini says it was getting close, but she doesn't know what it was, and Layla says that person might be in danger. Taein becomes enraged with more rage, and the constellation continues trying to suppress him. The constellation warns that this power was rivaling that of a cosmic creature, and that at this rate the pervert would destroy Earth alone. So she needed to stay there to restrain him. The girls should do this by themselves. Shinma goes through the window with Iljin in her arms. Layla calls out to her, and Yunai questions if they would just leave like that, and if it would be alright for only them to go. Shinma flies over the city with her jumping powers. Iljin questions why Shinma was taking him too, and Shinma says he understands this world, and is like then the hamburger thinks they need him. Shinma lands in front of a house, commenting that she can feel the energy of a peaceful person. Above it, Iljin says he wasn't worried about the zombies, since it was Miss Shinma. He wonders if they would open the door, because the world had changed, and that probably wasn't the main entrance. Shinma moves forward, saying she didn't know which floor it was. Then she enters through the window into a room. Iljin says he doesn't know how they did that. Shinma looks at the house, wondering if anyone really lived there. She can hear coming from behind the door the breathing of someone who hasn't been consumed by rage. Then she opens the door and is surprised. Iljin wonders what that was. It was a room full of posters from other webtoons. Shinma questions what these talismans were, but Iljin says they were strange enough to look like one, until the person on the bed stirs. Shinma prepares her cultivator energy, but Iljin asks her to wait. That person gets out of bed. It was a girl who had just woken up. Iljin falls in love and says she was an incredibly extraordinary beauty. Shinma throws him to the floor, saying it was unseemly. The girl there is surprised, because it was a talking hamburger and a celestial spirit girl, the kind of thing that only happens in a manhwa. Both are surprised, thinking she was just like Taein. The girl comments that it was like a scene from a webtoon. Cheon-ma asks if all the people in this country are like this, and Iljin denies it. That girl celebrates seeing a feminine Shinma talking to a hamburger. Then she introduces herself as Lenar. Iljin asks if she hadn't gone to school these days. Shinma asks if they know each other, but the hamburger says she was quite famous. She had a nickname at school. In the classroom, the teacher handed out the tests. He said the class president should give Nara her test, since she was sleeping. The class president wondered about this. She was surprised, because she had never seen Nara awake, yet Nara always got perfect scores on every test. Iljin commented that Nara was the #1 sleepy student. Nara spent all her time at school sleeping, and she confirmed it herself. She added that today was the school's foundation day, and Iljin explained that was why no one else had come. Shinma then asked it if Nara was sleeping. While the gates opened and monsters came out, Nara commented that it felt like a dream of stories with hunters and portals. Shinma grabbed her arm, warning that they should go. Nara asked to be put down, saying Shinma must be tired. The cultivator then said Nara really resembled Taein. Afterward they flew towards the school, while a figure watched them from afar. The figure commented that it was very interesting. Then he looked out the window, commenting that they were arriving. Ma landed at the school and announced that she had brought Nara, explaining the situation on the way. Nara said her heart was racing, but she noticed that there were only beautiful people in the classroom. Yunai recognized Nara, and Nara said it was a pleasure to meet her. Leila sighed, saying that Taein's situation was getting worse. Yujirina said they could still stop it, but at this point, taking his life would be the only option. Nara recognized the protagonist who was tied up. Iljin questioned if Nara also knew the pervert. Nara replied that Taein probably didn't remember her. She could say they were childhood friends, and that he introduced her to manhwas. Nara said it must be a dream for T to appear there. Yuju questioned how Nara wasn't affected by the virus. Nara said Yuju must be the constellation of justice, and that she heard about her on the way. Nara thought it must be because she was the owner of the dream. Yunis said Nara seemed confused about things. Nara replied that she could only speak by the way her crush appeared. In that dream, it was a dream made just for the two of them. The protagonist lost his reason and became a berserker. When no one knew what to do with him, Nara appeared. Yunai questioned what Nara said and what she was doing now. As Nara hugged Tae, Nara asked her love to stop because it was okay, since it was her and he should remember. Yurini told Nara to get back as Tae was dangerous, but Nara struck her own eyes crying. She told Tae to forget the difficult times, as everything would be fine. The tears continued to stream down and fell onto the protagonist's face. One of them dripped onto Tae's forehead and began to purify the rage virus. Nara continued to hug him. Shinma wondered what she was seeing. Diljin commented that the scene looked familiar, wanting to know where she had seen it before. You do, Rina. I thought there was no way that could have happened. Nara began to regenerate the protagonist with her affection. Tae woke up completely lost. Nara explained that this was the way to bring the protagonist back. Sincere hug and the tears of his childhood friend. The protagonist merely questioned who she was. Nara became embarrassed and introduced herself. Kain recognized her as the girl who sleeps in class. Shinma noticed that Layla was going crazy with anger. Yudorinai explained that Nara had managed to cure him. Kain summarized this girl, who wasn't even a constellation, suddenly appeared and fixed everything he had heard before about a hug and tears from a childhood friend, and it must be something on that level, holding the position of girl and love in him. All the other group members thought he was back. In any case, the protagonist thanked her. That outfit must be strained. So he told Nara to put on her shirt. Nara thought she knew it was a dream, but she couldn't even look him in the eyes. Then the protagonist added her to the group as well, taking the support position. They needed a smart girl like her, and she must be the key to advancing. In Hijaku Runa's tutorial, Yudorina thought that a human was neutralizing the power of a constellation and could be more dangerous than the pervert. The protagonist said that as expected, there was no other way but to deal with that bastard. Nara commented that it was a very detailed dream. Yunai said it wasn't a dream and that Earth's fate really depended on them. Nara said she understood the protagonist said they should return to Hijaku Runa's home. But Yudinai said that if they went like this, it would only repeat the previous failure. Tien wondered what they should do. As Hijakaruna was not an opponent they could defeat in a fight. Nara questioned the situation and asked them to explain everything. The protagonist looked at Nara, thinking that of all the people he knew, she was the smartest. He would explain everything from that moment on, and then they should strategize. Meanwhile, in another distant part of the city, a light reached Hyuja-Karuna's home. Hyuja-Karuna began to laugh. He said it was annoying as the protagonist had returned on his own, and asked how the group had grown by one person. Tien thanked Hyuja-Karuna, saying that he had annoyed him, but now it was enough. Hyuja-Karuna became irritated and advanced towards Tien, saying he was getting angry. His fist approached the protagonist, but he merely smiled. An explosion occurred in that domain. The girls created a barrier to stop the remnants of the explosion. Hyuja-Karuna was surprised by this, as his fist hadn't even hit Tain's face. All thanks to Yudorinai, who had used the protection of justice. The protagonist said they should increase the tension. Once more irritating Hyuja-Karuna, the constellation asked what the hell Yudorinai was doing, siding with these insects to take down a constellation like him. But Yudorinai replied that it wasn't that, and that she had come there to protect him. Hyuja-Karuna asked what kind of nonsense that was and struck once more. Tain said that, with the protection of justice by his side, he could be on the same level as a constellation's power. Hyuja-Karuna laughed, saying that this was annoying. His necklace began to glow and his powers increased. The protagonist thought that this was the trigger for Hyuja-Karuna's second phase, which had appeared previously. Hyuja-Karuna asked if the protagonist was saying he could rival a constellation. He should have come to compare his power, and not just that of cosmic beings. Then Hyuja-Karuna struck the protagonist with a fist and broke the barrier. His entire world was at peace, but it suddenly exploded. Tain flew out and Yujirina suffered the damage. Yujirina called her friend and Hyuja-Karuna aside. Then Yujirina questioned how Hyuja-Karuna had become so strong as to break her authority so easily, but Hyuja-Karuna replied that he hadn't gotten stronger. Then he called everyone insects, asking if they would believe him if he told them he had held back his rage. Having lived his entire life with rage, he couldn't have anything because everything was ruined or broken by his rage. And what angered him most was ironically his own rage. The man who wanted to control his rage was himself. That was why he concentrated his rage into this artifact, the Amulet of Rage. He thought it was time to let his rage go, releasing all his energy as far as he could. Anya asked what that was. All of Hugikaru's energy materialized into beasts. Hugikaru crouched down and ordered his creatures to go take Taiyan's life. Taiyan reflected that he believed in everyone there, and in his best releasing stage 1 of Ascension. He used replica, saying there would be no point in sparing the artist from working creating hundreds of copies of himself. Hugikaru laughed, telling that insect to do whatever he wanted, because he would be extinguished today anyway. Yudo and I made a straight cut on one of the monsters, but the monster regenerated, creating 2 more heads. Yudo Rini commented that because of this battle would be infinite, and Nara said their plan was already over. Yudo Rini used a glow magic, and Nara commented that they should go back and bring Tai in immediately. The Constellation of Justice said she would like that too, but someone had to protect them during this time. She thought it was her fault for not having given this kind of information before. She had to put things in order, and so she advanced, cutting the lava snake once more with all her strength. In addition, she used her peace glow magic, but she ended up being caught by a snake's bite. But Cheonma used her celestial demon seal to defeat the snake. Cheonma told them to stop calling her the Constellation of Justice. Yudo Rene looked back surprised. It was explained that the opponent was a serpent formed from the obsidian of wrath, manifested by the constellation's power. Layla says she can fight too, since everyone received shared power from Taiyan, and with Udernai's blessing, they have a chance. The constellation thinks these life forms possess a strong will to live. Hugikaru was wrong in his ideas, for humanity was the noblest among all life forms created before. Hugikaru lands a punch on Taiyan's face, shouting that Taiyan couldn't hide for much longer. All of the protagonist's clones are destroyed by the infernal explosion. Taiyan thinks he had kept his main body at a distance, but realizing the danger, he uses the exclusion ability. Hugikaru grabs a clone by the neck, saying that Taiyan was underestimating him, but he wants to know the reason for the lack of counterattack. The protagonist replies that it was because he didn't want to fight him. Flashing a smile, Hugikaru asks what Taiyan meant, but the protagonist replies that constellations don't lose their lives at all, so it would be an endless fight. In that case, he would make Hugikaru his companion as well. Before all this at school, Yudorinai says the idea makes sense. Lenara says it was a very good plan. Shinmak questions if it was possible for leaders to ally with a cosmic entity, and Iljin says that Rinai was also a cosmic being. Yunai asks what Tan thought about it. Tan replies absolutely not. The girl asks why then. The protagonist explains that making Hugikaru his ally seemed very strange. They weren't familiar with the existing ones, and adding another character would make things chaotic. Besides, readers want a battle, and the girls question what he was talking about. Shinma says she was against this plan too, because this guy was a monster trying to wipe out all of humanity. She wouldn't be satisfied until she took his life with her own hands, but Yudoria says that won't happen. Humans can never take the lives of constellations. Lila asks if Yudoria would fight for them, but Yudoria explains that combat between constellations was forbidden, but if the plan was to make Hugikaru an ally, it would allow them to use his strength. Taiyan tries to say he still doesn't want to, but Nara says if he has a better idea, he just needs to tell them. The protagonist falls silent, trying to figure something out, but then says that in this case he has no choice, asking Yudorina to tell him everything she knows about Hugikaru. Back in the present, the protagonist says he wants him as an ally because he heard that Hugikaru's star was special from the moment it was born, but Hugikaru punches Taiyan in the face. The protagonist uses Mirage Advance and says that Hugikaru became envious of everything surrounding the stars, remembering people saying he was the brightest, even among all the stars that were born. At that time, Hugikaru would become a constellation very quickly, but because of his innate nature, Hugikaru asks who Taiyan thinks he is to judge him. The other stars say they don't want to associate with Hugikaru as he was vulgar and had a bad personality, causing problems for everyone. Hugikaru gets annoyed by everyone avoiding him until someone calls his name. Seikei says he truly values Hugikaru's consistency, so he would place him in the position of the Constellation of Wrath, and expects him to complete his mission for the sake of cosmic order. Hugikaru thinks that was the feeling of being recognized. Then he shouts that only now had he experienced such a bad feeling, and it irritates him. After that, he silently carried out his duties as a constellation. Hugikaru calls him a bastard, hitting Taiyan and saying he was an insect, acting as if he knew something. The protagonist tells Hugikaru to let all the rage go, as he would take everything, but the protagonist emphasizes this, saying he was an ally who wouldn't break or leave. Hugikaru thinks about it for a few seconds. Taiyan thinks, please, it has to work, I'm reaching my limit with this guy. Hugikaru says Taiyan is the first to say something like that. To him he was a pathetic insect, He wanted to see if he would really go away. The protagonist thinks this was dangerous and he would lose his life, until the protagonist notices the way it was written. Hoji Karuna uses his hell explosion on the other side. Layla strikes the multi-headed snake with her dagger. She gasps for breath as everyone in the group watches the serpent. Hoji Karuna says it's been a long time since he unleashed so much rage. It was very refreshing now. Protagonist says he didn't need to thank him. Yujikirama is impressed that the protagonist is alive. He wonders how the protagonist survived, since he had no cards left. Taiyan thinks that could be called the protagonist's plot armor. Then Taiyan says he was truly fine, and that Yujikirama should know that deep down. He was a good man, the constellation says. Tain was talking as if he knew everything. All this time Tain explains that the constellation spread the rage virus to wipe out humanity. When Tain saw with his own eyes, people were just angry, not hurting each other, unlike how zombies fight in other stories. However, when those who weren't infected were attacked, that was how the rage virus spread into their bodies too. And then the constellation finally understood that the source of his rage was the despair of finding someone who understood his frustration. The constellation tried not to burn others, enduring the frustration alone for an unimaginable time, and all of humanity understood him. That must have been truly very hard for the constellation. The constellation cursed himself before because of his innate personality, wondering why he was like that. With a feeling that overwhelmed him as he tried to live a normal life like everyone else, the constellation knew he could change himself, but it wouldn't be that easy. But now the constellation knows there's no point in enduring these thoughts alone. The constellation has already been through a lot, but now he has friends who appreciate his worth. Then Taiyan asks Hujakaruna to become his companion. The constellation falls silent for a few seconds. Then Hajakaruna says that feeling this way now makes him truly very angry. Taiyan doesn't react to the blow. He is thrown away by Hajakaruna. The constellation says he doesn't need this, and that the protagonist should lose his life. Hitting him multiple times, Taiyan is thrown to the ground. Yudoinai calls out to him as he falls to the ground. Yujakurun advances once more to strike the protagonist, but hits the ground instead. Constellation asks Hajakaruna to stop, and Layla calls out to her friend. Hajakaruna calls him a bastard, saying he can't stay angry. Lenara heals him, and the protagonist says it was a classic scene. Yudoinai tells Hujakarna to look around. Hujakarna realizes where he is, and his eyes gleam. He comments that it was a beautiful place. Hujakarna says everything has become frozen and laughs, while Tain questions what he desires. Tain asks if Hujakarna would become his companion, and with that extends his hand. Hujakarna looks upwards. He comments that he would accept. The protagonist says Hujakarna made the right choice, and that he isn't a fan of the kind of story that had happened until then, but he was counting on Hajakaruna. Until the protagonist notices he can't touch Hajakaruna, and the latter says he might not be able to join him. After all, Eudorius shouts. Not understanding what was happening, Hujakuruna explains that originally, constellations were supposed to disappear when they lost their reason for existence. Now that he no longer had a target for his rage, he was fading away. Tain questions what Hujakuruna was talking about, but the latter hands him the necklace, telling the protagonist to take it. That was Hujakarna's artifact, the amulet of rage, an object that had condensed and stored his rage for countless years. This would surely be of help to the protagonist. On his journey, the protagonist questions what Hujakarna was talking about, as he needed to come with them. Hujakarna then laughs, apologizing for having called the protagonist a worm. All this time, he says he finally formed an unbreakable connection, only to disappear like this. Hujakaruna says he's very irritated by that. Taiyan calls Hujakaruna's name, but Yudorina's sword strikes the protagonist's neck. The protagonist dodges, and Yudorina says she shouldn't have let Hujakaruna live. Disappearance of a constellation was a collapse event that had never happened in the cosmic order. The balance calculated that the protagonist is a threat to the universe. The other group members shout for Rini to wait a second. You do. Rini prepares to make her final cut, replying that she's very sorry, but someone grabs the sword, telling her to wait a second. Rini recognizes him as the constellation of Fawn. Amashura. The protagonist thinks Amashura was a super strong guy with fox-like eyes. The girl asks what Amashura was doing there, but he asks her to calm down and listen. Amashura can't believe Tien was trying to make Hoji Karuma his ally. He congratulates him for getting his hands on the Constellation of Wrath's artifact. More importantly, there was a decree from the King of Constellations. Taiyan questions what was said. Waving his hand, the decree was to perform the divine ceremony of the human bion. Taiyan Yujirine gets irritated by the news. Inyani questions what that meant. Amashura summarizes, it was an invitation to become a constellation. In his terms, it should be a gathering of friends. The protagonist tells Amashiro not to make him laugh, because the constellations treat everyone as ingredients for their recipes, and we're even trying to get rid of them. Amashiro tells the protagonist to relax, as not all constellations agree with this. Constellations designated them in the first place, and that's strange, but Amashiro wants to know if the protagonist is sure about rejecting the ceremony, even if it benefits him. Taein quickly refuses and glares coldly at Amashiro. Amashiro says that was exactly what he expected. Amashiro had been observing for quite some time, transcendent who valued fun above all else, questioning how he, the constellation of fun, could ignore such a thing. But it wasn't just Amashiro. The other constellations were also interested in the humans' actions, even more so after Hoji Karuna's defeat. The protagonist tells Amashiro to get out of there, but Amashiro says he's sorry and that it would be amazing to see him. So immersed in fun, Amashiro has settled some things with the king of constellations, and will tell him that Baeon Taein refused the divine ceremony, but the protagonist should be prepared. From now on, all constellations, including the 12 houses of the zodiac, have become the protagonist's enemies. The protagonist asks about the houses of the zodiac, and Amashiro confirms. Amashiro explains that, among the countless constellations, there were the brightest stars designated by the king of constellations. The 12 most advanced among them symbolize the constellations, and each has the power to destroy all life in the universe. The protagonist questions this, as 12 invincible beings would become his enemies. Amashiro says the protagonist can exclude one now, since the constellation of justice had already taken the protagonist's side. The protagonist asks if Yudurini was one of the 12 houses of the zodiac. Yudurini confirms, saying that, before receiving the title of Constellation of Justice, her original name was Yudurini of Liber. Currently she is the 7th of the 12 houses. Protagonist says he has been accompanied by such an incredible person. That mark might be on all constellations. And Omoshire confirms, but the pattern is different among them. Omoshire says he saw them fighting Hoji Karuna, and at this rate, Yudorinai would soon lose her position as one of the 12 houses of the zodiac. Yudorinai says the position is not important to her. She only wants to preserve the order of the universe, and if she had to, she would give up the position. Amashiro comments that she doesn't even like jokes. The protagonist asks if Amashiro has anything else to say, and the constellation of fun wonders what the protagonist wants. Amashiro says that Taein is just like him, so the protagonist should entertain him, as Amashiro would also entertain him. Cheonma says he was waiting for an opponent like Amashiro. Cheonma advances with his demonic energy, saying he will take Amashiro's life. Amashiro asks Cheonma not to use such harsh words, because that was scaring Amashiro. Cheonma uses his strongest attack. Taein is surprised, and Amashiro asks if that's how it was done. Amashiro flicks Cheonma, which destroys that entire dimension. Luckily Yudorinai manages to teleport them away, and the planet explodes during the teleportation. Yudorinai asks if Cheonma is alright, because without Justice's protection, Cheonma would have lost his life. The girl replies that losing one's life fighting someone stronger would be fun. Amashiro appears during the teleportation, saying he completely agrees. He asks where everyone was going, because as expected, humans are interesting. Amashiro asks why Taein was so angry, since he saved the protagonist's life earlier. The protagonist wonders if Amashiro would be able to withstand Hoji Karuna's attack. Because of that, Amashiro says he protects fun, and for that reason would protect the protagonist, making sure that the other constellation wouldn't gang up on him all at once. After all, he is Amashiro of Capricorn, the 10th of the 12 houses. And in addition, he whispers something into the protagonist's ear. Amashiro says that seems fun, and that he has high hopes for the protagonist. Then he places a flute in his hand, warning him that if he wants to play with him, he just needs to play the flute, bidding farewell and saying he would see him later. The protagonist looks at the flute in his hand. Thus they arrived on Earth near the school. Yuna said that no matter how many times she did it, he still hadn't gotten used to it. The protagonist questioned the pace, as he hadn't even had time to take care of Hoji Karuna. Yudorinai apologized for attacking the protagonist. Earlier the protagonist told her not to worry, but Yudorinai replied that he had endured a great deal. Yudorinai had been arrogant to think she could judge on her own, and decided to return to the sanctuary for instructions. Meanwhile Cheonma asked to revert to her original form, as she wished to train. Lanara questioned what the protagonist would do next. The protagonist began to ponder, and Iljan instructed everyone to look at a specific point. The group turned, observing the people's everyday lives. They were going about their professions. The protagonist commented that the rage virus was calm, and Iljan told him he had truly saved the world. Taein thought for a few seconds, and then declared that the group was disbanded. Iljan questioned this, and the protagonist stated that everyone could return to their normal lives. The protagonist said he still hadn't completed it on his own. Despite the title, Hamburger questioned what he was talking about. The protagonist said he did everything by himself. Suddenly the system screen appeared before him, and Iljin questioned why it had happened so abruptly. Tyan was impressed that he could see it too. The system displayed an immense amount of text, and the protagonist declared that he didn't read messages longer than 4 lines. Then, the system warned that he would be penalized for eliminating Hajikarumen. The protagonist asked what kind of penalty it would be. He wanted to know if they would strip him of his powers, or confine him in a special prison. Then the system stated that the protagonist and his companions were under special surveillance, and that he could no longer block constellations, being required to attend their trials. The rest of the group gathered to observe. Tane asked if they could also see the status window, and one of the girls questioned what a system was. She said that when the system mentioned companions, it must be referring to them. The system confirmed, and the protagonist declared that he would take responsibility and deal with it alone, so he should leave his friends out of it. The system told him to stop being ridiculous. The system said he should have an idea of how many problems he'd cause by being treated as a servant, and that he should stop skipping all texts longer than 4 lines. Taein questioned if that was how a system was supposed to act. Renee said that a constellation like herself should participate in the trials of other constellations. Her system confirmed, adding that it was something they would regret, but before that, since he had overcome the trial of wrath, he would receive a reward. The protagonist was surprised by this. He was left alone with his group, who were annoyed with him. The day passed by. Tian No apologized and rescinded the group's disbandment, then asked them to stay with him. Kyung Ma said she was tired of it, and that perhaps taking the protagonist's life would solve everything. But Layla asked her to calm down. Rini complained that this was a problem, as they didn't know when the next trial would occur and couldn't act separately. Yunai apologized to everyone, but even now all she wished was to see her parents as soon as possible, as she was going mad with worry for them. Layla went to console Yunyi, and Lanara suggested they go to her house first. Tane thought that the protagonist had only protected his own parents, but hadn't considered those of the others, and said that everyone should go there. He thought they deserved a little peace at home. Yunai ran into her mother's arms. Yunai's mother thanked the gods that she was safe. The protagonist excused himself, and Yunyi's mother called her husband, informing him that their daughter had returned, and Yunyi's father appeared. He said there was chaos outside, and that it must have been the protagonist who kept his daughter safe. The protagonist said it was something like that, thinking it was a bit presumptuous, but Yunyi's father simply thanked the protagonist. Tyan explained what had happened. Ayumia's father said it was hard to believe, but the protagonist was truly amazing. For saving humanity, Ayumia's father was very happy that she had a friend like the protagonist. The protagonist thought about it, and Lanara asked if it was alright to wear those clothes. Yunai confirmed, since she couldn't keep wearing the ones the pervert gave her. Layla questioned if the factory from Med-Era was so clean and durable, while Yudarina didn't understand the concept of clothes. Protagonist asked if the clothes he made were bad. Anya said that at least they fit their sizes, and asked if Chinmar really didn't want to wear them, but Chinmar replied that he would rather go to hell than wear those clothes. Yunya's mother said the food was ready, and asked her daughter to take it out of the oven. The food was brought to the table, and Tyan was delighted. Baliljan asked if Yunya's mother could cook too. Layla said that place was very peaceful. The wife asked her husband to set the dining table in the living room. She hadn't expected so many visitors, but she told them to eat as much as they wanted, and to let her know if they wanted more. Everyone was surprised by this. Layla thanked them for the food, and Chinma asked what a fork was. The protagonist commented that the food was great, while Yunya's father thought he ate well, and would make a great son-in-law. Yunya's mother explained that it was lasagna, her daughter's favorite dish. The girl, however, complained that she hadn't made it with him in mind. Chinma said she could be a professional chef, and Lanara thought she was a sundae. The girl recounted that when she was younger, she dreamed of being a chef, which was why she prepared it so serious. Everyone shared a wonderful meal, conversing and interacting with each other. Iljin wondered if the taste was better because they were eating together. Time passed, and the meal ended, leaving everyone satisfied. Heian thanked them for the food, and said she cooked very well, and Yunya's mother thanked him until a voice appeared, saying it was a bit salty for her taste. Ayan questioned since when she had been there, and Yujirina recognized her. It was the constellation of cuisine Oishikaner, who replied that it was appreciable. The protagonist asked why she appeared so suddenly, and Oishikaner replied that it was an obvious question. She came to show the spicy flavor of the tests. Tain asked if they were going to fight there, and told Yunya's father to stay behind him, but Oishikaner replied no, as she was not that kind of constellation. She had always been curious about the meals enjoyed by the beings the constellations create. Her test for him was to create a dish that satisfied her tastes, using ingredients he himself would have to find and cook. Ian asked about having another test, and why he should do that. Wishikana replied that he should consider himself lucky, or if it weren't for the suggestion of Omashura, the constellation of Fawn, he and all of humanity would be wiped out. If he failed her test or the others came, the end of humanity would be inevitable, so she would give him a week to prepare. And he could notify her through the system when he was ready, bidding farewell afterward. She vanished from the room. Ani's mother asked what that had been, and the girl questioned why she had to cook for constellations. The protagonist thought that wasn't something his powers could do, until he realized something. Immediately afterward, he informed Ani's father and mother that they would be leaving again to save the world. The father said he was counting on him for the future of humanity and his daughter. The girl yelled at her father for saying that. Elsewhere, Unai asked what the plan was now. Ian remembered when he had summoned Layla, and Unai also remembered then. The protagonist said he would summon someone who fit the conditions within his dimension. In the meantime, they could go to such a dimension. The girl asked what that was supposed to mean. The protagonist explained that he would teleport everyone to a dimension with the best ingredients from all of space and time. He teleported his friends to a sunny place. The protagonist opened his eyes. Shinma questioned where he had brought them this time. Bilchin was impressed and wanted to know what was in front of them. The protagonist asked what else it could be, besides a dragon, which would be the start of their journey with the group to other worlds. The dragon let out a roar before the group. Lenara panicked, while Layla and Ani complained about it being another large monster. That dragon began to breathe fire towards the group. The protagonist said he had things he needed to deal with. He received a full blast from a dragon, which he easily blocked. Tane complained that it was too easy and prepared to attack. He destroyed the dragon with a flick, saying his power control was flawed. He used the ability to go back in time. That dragon was completely bewildered by it, but the protagonist said he would really appreciate taming a dragon. That monster asked him to wait a second before taking its life. It took a human form and opened its eyes sadly. It apologized and begged for its life to be spared, while Tane complained that its expression didn't match what it was saying. The dragon introduced himself as Dekasos, the 14th guardian of the ancient forest. He had appeared suddenly and seemed dangerous. Tane said it was anticlimactic, and Dekasos questioned if he was a hero. The protagonist replied that yes, he was the student who fell from another world, destined to be a hero. Dekasos questioned if he was the child of the prophecy, and Tane said that such a setup was indeed present. Then the dragon explained that 50,000 years had passed since a prophecy and the dragon clan was created and passed down through generations. 5 days later, 2 moons would converge. 7 strangers would arrive at the Pillar of Light, but there were only 6 of them. The protagonist said he understood, so basically they were supposed to do that and save the world from the Demon King. Dekasos remarked that he seemed to know the prophecy's content. Tane told him to forget that and asked what the most delicious thing in the world was. The dragon was utterly bewildered. The day passed. The protagonist summarized that this continent, Ijigani, had 4 great delicacy. A legendary flower from the world tree, which blooms once every 1,000 years. Eating it fills one with vitality for 10 years. The spines of a lava sea urchin, a creature that emerged from the wars of the past. Dragon eggs, considered the best fantasy ingredient of all, and the meat from the hidden light of the paradise rabbit. These were the 4 ingredients. Tane asked if Dekasos, being a dragon, could give his eggs. Dekasos replied that he was very rude. The protagonist asked why they didn't just summon all of them there now. He began the magic to create all the ingredients. However, Dekasos stopped him. Dekasos said he couldn't summon those things there, and now Tane argued that they were just ingredients. The dragon explained that the lava sea urchin lived in the underworld cavern beneath the Demon King's castle and survived under immense lava pressure. If you were to summon such a creature to a different place, the pressure difference would cause an instant explosion. The protagonist then asked about summoning the other ingredients. Dekasos replied that they were called rare for a reason. The world tree hadn't bloomed in over 30 years. The paradise rabbit was hunted for its unique flavor and was now extinct. Furthermore, Dekasos would never give his eggs. Tane told Dekasos to calm down. The dragon asked why they were looking for these things in the first place, and if they could even call themselves the Heroes Group. The protagonist replied that they were trying to save the world on their own and didn't expect Dekasos to understand, but honestly he would appreciate his help. Dekasos thought this guy was serious, and Dekasos closed his eyes, saying that if Tane was the boy of the prophecy, it was his duty to help first. They must reach the world tree and the lava sea urchin. The elves who serve the world tree could be of great help for the lava sea urchin. They would need to dig through the underworld caverns and search in the lava. They might encounter the Demon King's army in the process, but with their level of strength, it would surely be easy. Picasso asked if they should find these two ingredients. First, the protagonist replied that it looked good and they would split into two groups. Linara asked which group he would join. Tien replied that he would be in both, splitting himself into two clones. Decasus inquired about this. Tien mused to himself, thinking that usually in such situations, one side would inevitably run into trouble and cause problems. The World Tree team consisted of Yen Yalai, Lyra Anara, and Decasus. Meanwhile, the Demon King's castle team would be Iljin Shinma and Yudo Rana. The World Tree group advanced into the forest, and the protagonist asked Decasus why he hadn't gone to the Demon King's castle and had come here instead. Decasus replied that the Demon King was terrifying, but Tien exclaimed that Decasus's expression didn't match what he was saying. Then Decasus announced that they had arrived at the city of the elves, who protected the World Tree. That was the city of Silbit Hill. Linara commented that it was beautiful. The protagonist remarked that the tree was something out of a fantasy, inspired by Norse mythology. Suddenly magical arrows flew in their direction, but Tien blocked them with a flick of his hand, and remarked that it was quite a unique reception. An elf appeared, declaring that they were humans full of tricks, and that it was audacious to set foot in the realm of the World Tree. He shouldn't even think of returning alive. The Cassos ordered them to stop, while Tien commented that it was rather cute to see all the elves. Suddenly, one of the elves recognized the dragon's voice. Then the dragon revealed that this was the child of prophecy. The elves questioned this, stating that it was impossible for a mere human to be the child of prophecy. Tien felt offended at being called a mere human. The elf descended from the tree, asserting that Tien's pathetic race could never be the child of prophecy, and that Decasos must be mistaken. Tien asked if they knew each other. Decasos explained that it was Beldor, the captain of the guard and prince of the elves. Beldor held all decision-making authority among the elves. They needed to convince him somehow, but his personality. Beldor declared that humans were merely dirty, stupid, and vulgar, until he noticed Layla amidst the group. With her breathtaking beauty, the elf was immediately smitten with her. At the same time, at the Demon King's castle, Tien commented that the atmosphere was so intense, it made his heart race and sighed as a boat. The Demon King observed them. He remarked that this was quite interesting. Back in Sylvan Hill, the elves served food to the group. Linara thanked them for the meal. Tien asked if this was what they called a dessert. Stomach lay. Layla inquired what fruit it was, as it was delicious. Beldor explained that it was a crispy feather, and was pleased that she enjoyed it. Decasos remarked that even the hostile Beldor was treating humans this way, and that this moment would surely go down in history. The elf prince inquired if Layla was searching for something, as the elves would do their utmost to assist. The woman of prophecy. Tien thanked the elf prince, taking his hand, for they were there to find the World Tree flower. Beldor ordered Tien to remove his filthy hands. Tien bristled, and Linara tried to calm him. Beldor explained that if it was the World Tree flower they sought, there were none left, and another wouldn't bloom for 30 years. Layla questioned if there truly was no other way. Tien stated that, if he were to intervene with the World Tree, it might be possible. The elves draw their weapons upon hearing this. The Cassos orders them to lower their weapons, and the elves ask if they're there to plunder the tree. The dragon warns Tien that this is a symbol of faith, and he should mind his words. Tien apologizes, but with his world being destroyed, without this he would be helpless. Eldor questions if he is the hero of the prophecy, and Layla pleads, wanting to know if there truly is no other way. The elves are captivated by Layla's beauty. Beldor fakes a cough to change the mood, announcing that their great sage, the elder, must know something. Upon meeting the old man, he says that they have already eaten all the flower from the World Tree. It bloomed over 1,000 years ago, and he wants to know how Tien expects to find it now. But they should wait a moment, for perhaps if they live another 30 years, they might be able to see it bloom. Tien questions if that wasn't possible, and Nara reminds him that Oisachner gave them a 1-week deadline. The old man recounts that when he was young, he had the chance to drink tea made from the World Tree's petals, and after 700 years he still remembers the taste. It was a divine flavor, as if the forest of vitality had blessed him, and he imagined how fresh a flower must have been. Questioning if humans were envious of it, Yuna questions if the elder truly is the wisest elf. The Rional says they shouldn't even think about approaching the tree, as they don't even know if they are the chosen ones. The elder says his staff is made from a branch of the World Tree. Tien should take a good look before leaving, and if he's alive in 30 years, he's free to visit. Beldor says that is expected of the elder. He was the one who taught them how to do this, and the Cassos complains that it wasn't an achievement. The old man questions if Tae has never seen something like this. Tae simply snatches the staff from the old man's hand. Eldor questions what Tae was doing, and then he says he can't just steal a staff like that. Tae activates the lightning growth skill. Suddenly that staff begins to bloom. That Cassos wonders why this was happening. And Tyan says that, since they love the world trees so much, it would be good for them to have another one of the same size. Tamriel asks how this is possible. And Tyan says that it blooms only once every 1,000 years. With several flowers atop the tree, the elves rejoice that this has happened, glorifying the hero of the prophecy for saving their race. Tyan says that skipping 6,000 years is one thing, but 1,000 years was nothing special. Tamriel falls to the ground and says that this was legendary. At that moment he witnessed a miracle from the gods, with Tyan announcing that they had obtained the World Tree's seed. Wanting to know how the Demon King's team was faring. On the other side, Kim Il-jin destroys a demon with his charge. That demon comments that it was unbelievable, as the fourth heavenly king, Berchilano, was defeated by someone like him. While Kim Il-jin says it was disappointing to be the Demon King's gatekeeper, Tien comments that Kim Il-jin truly was charismatic. And the hamburger is happy about the compliment. The girls merely watch without reacting, until Tyan celebrates that the gate was opening. Yakim says that even Beradulino, who could easily handle 10 dragons alone, had been defeated so quickly. This was impressive to Yakim, one of the 4 heavenly kings, but he was the weakest of them all. And Tyan finishes Yakim's sentence, saying that he fully understands the demon's plight. Yakim says it was interesting, but he cannot maintain his confidence against Tyan. And Tyan jokes that this guy was baring his teeth, trying not to be afraid. Shinma prepared his power, saying it was fun and they could go ahead. But Tyan told him not to say that so casually, as it was basically a spell to invite death. Yakim said that these fools were ignoring him, then activated the power in his hand, but Shinma retaliated with a slash of his power. Only the demonic arm remained, and Shinma said he didn't have to provoke him. Even the demon lord shouldn't be that bad. Upon entering the castle, Tyan commented that his castle was rather dark, then questioned if the next celestial king was there. Suddenly they heard a very loud sound. A chain woman appeared and said it was good to meet her dear brother. He had come all the way to the Demon King's castle, but this would be his limit. She introduced herself as the Scythe of Chains, but was hit on the head by Shinma. The woman was defeated as the girl questioned what was wrong with those people, as she felt so bored she could lose her life. It was an existential crisis, that of finding a trivial life form, created by the constellations. The protagonist commented that it seemed only cosmic entities could challenge them now. Then a voice laughed asking if that was all. The protagonist was surprised to see the defeated woman's body rise. The other celestial kings also rose in zombie forms. Valaduta revealed that this was his power as the strongest celestial king. The zombie army, he ordered them to kneel before his overwhelming strength. The protagonist realized it was a trick. They revived no matter how many times they tried it to take their lives. Then the protagonist activated the simultaneous conjuration ability. The dimensional exile portal formed above and below Valaduta. The same thing happened to the other celestial kings. Valaduta questioned how that could be fair. Tyan closed the portals, saying that perhaps they could find peace there. He wondered if they could now go to the ocean of lava beneath the underground cavern. The rest of the group confirmed that was what they had come for. They kept walking through the castle without stopping, but the protagonist wondered if that wasn't the way to the underground cave. He wondered if the demon lord had already appeared and if they should deal with him quickly as well, but Yujirina asked them to wait a moment. The demon lord commanded them to kneel. Then the protagonist group repeated the action. Tyan wondered what that was, and Yujirina questioned how he was there. The demon lord replied that it was obvious. After all, this was his castle. He was the constellation of war. Zeta Shuro's moments earlier, as they were heading to the castle, Takasis decided to explain about the 4 heavenly kings. Heian said that a spoiler wouldn't be fun. Kinil-jin commented that he should be surprised by how strange the hero was. The dragon said that he only needed one thing to warn them that the Demon King was truly strong. For thousands of years, countless heroes had tested their strength and challenged the Demon King, but none of them had defeated him. Besides being strong for some reason, he didn't personally attack the human realm. Tane commented that they were always like that, but it was fine as he would deal with it somehow. Back in the present, the protagonist was kneeling on the ground. Tane questioned how you do. Renai knew him. The girl explained that he was the strongest constellation who ended the ancient constellation wars with combat power alone and secured a position among the 12. He was the one who caused the creation of the law that prohibits combat between constellations. Protagonist questioned why someone like that was playing Demon King. Zeta replied that it was simply because he loved war, but thanks to the decision of the Constellation Council, he couldn't participate in wars directly, so he created a planet where countless factions were in an endless conflict. Watching the life forms he created go to war, he was truly satisfied. Furthermore, among the life forms that endured the trials of war, he was able to harvest negentropy, stronger than that found in any other dimension. So he declared himself the Demon King, and created that dimension. Tai-hin questioned if he threatened lives in that manner as well, declaring he would get rid of him. As he rose to his feet, Zeta said that he could defy his orders. The reward for overcoming a huge Akiruma's test was that Ascension Level 2 had been unlocked. Protagonist activated his Divine Verdict skill, and Eudora and I cried out that it was too much. Dozens of angels advanced towards Zeta, but he simply transformed his weapon into a shield. Thus he managed to defend against the blows. While Zeta questioned if that was the strongest skill of the light attribute, that had certainly been impressive as it destroyed the rest of the world. Then he commanded his weapon to transform into a halberd. As he was anticipating a fight with the hero of prophecy, he was intrigued by what he had heard about a human capable of annihilating a constellation, and that this hero of prophecy was now before him. He had to witness it, but Eudora asked him to wait, as they were currently undergoing the test of the constellation of gastronomy, and he should not interfere. Zeta explained that he had no intention of doing so, but they were the ones who had invaded his castle. But now that Eudorini had mentioned it, Zeta remembered something, an interesting reminder Amashure had made in the past. Amashure had summoned all the constellations, and stated that they were interested in the new awakened. They wanted to administer tests, and obtain the best negentropy from him. But no matter how strong they were, if they all attacked at once, humanity would be wiped out in an instant. Therefore they should make it fair, starting with the constellations that expressed themselves first, and not just because Amashiro had spoken first. Questioning if anyone had any objections, the constellations agreed. Fearing Amashiro, Zeta said that as a result, his turn was pushed back, and he was number 389 in line. Yudo Renai said they were only there to find ingredients from this dimension. Zeta replied that as the master of the dimension, he could create anything, so they just needed to speak up. The two exchanged glances. The protagonist asked for lava sea thorns, and Zeta questioned how many they needed. Taiyan asked for as many as possible, and the constellation accepted. Zeta created dozens of lava sea thorns. He questioned if they needed anything else. Taiyan asked if Zeta also had dragon eggs and paradise rabbits. Dozens of them were created in front of the group. Taiyan wondered what kind of cheat this was, but Zeta told him to hurry and complete the tests so they could face each other properly. The protagonist thought for a few seconds, and then a smile spread across his face as he agreed. He said he would return someday to propose a duel, while Kim Il-jin commented that the Demon King was truly very kind. Zeta told him not to lose his life, but Taiyan asked Zeta to just wait. Back in the land of the elves, the protagonist commented that he was angry. To think he had only just discovered something so delicious made him furious, and the others also cried as they ate the flowers late. Layla said it was so good raw, and tried to imagine how it would taste if prepared properly. Until the other group arrived there, they asked what it was, and Takaso said they should be extinct. Taiyan's clone questioned if the original had gotten them all at once, wanting to know where he had found one of these. Then the clone greeted the original. Taiyan Takaso's commented that so many rare ingredients were gathered in the same place. He wanted to know if Taiyan had really defeated the Demon Lord, and Tamiriel commented that it was to be expected from the hero of prophecy. Shinma cried as she ate the world tree flower, and Layla played with a rabbit. The elves began to lift Taiyan, calling him the hero of prophecy. Taiyan wondered if they thought he had defeated the Demon Lord, or if he was merely going to do so someday. Yunai questioned how they could cook that. Tamriel approached, questioning why Yunai was looking at him since the Muriel only knew history and not cooking. The other girls looked at Yunia, who replied that she had never seen these ingredients before. Takaso's questioned visiting the best chef in Achikoni. He wasn't sure, but the royal chef should be able to handle any imaginable meal. Eudorina said that made sense. Taiyan commented that it was a good idea. They should go there now. Takasa's questioned why Taiyan was looking at him. The group flew on the dragon's back, while Chinma and Udarinai went alone. Taiyan said they should head towards the palace. In a village of the kingdom, a father and son commented that an immense bird was passing in the sky, but these were things that only existed in legends, until someone shouted that it was neither. The Casas landed in front of the family. Tane said it was a super dragon. He wanted to know if that was the capital of Achidunya, Ayabni, and if that place truly looked like another world. Takaso said that from now on, Tane was on his own, as he did not wish to meet the king of that country. He also warned Tane to be careful, but Takaso remembered not to give spoilers and said that Tane would understand when he met him. Tane thanked Takaso for his help, hoping they would meet again. The dragon said it was an honor to assist the hero of prophecy, even if briefless. Then he added that they should not meet again. The protagonist asked the citizens for permission to take the cart, while the young man told them to take whatever they wanted. They walked through the city. As Kim Il-jung announced the hero's party was passing by, Layla complained that everyone was staring at them, but someone stopped the group, calling out to them and demanding they hand over everything they had. The protagonist remarked that this was a classic scenario, while Anara added that they were just some bandits trying to pick up fight with the hero's party. The bandits questioned what they were talking about and demanded they hand over everything they had. Immediately then, a bandit with an axe said that Layla was very beautiful. Another bandit said he liked Cheama, but she looked at him as if she would take his life. The protagonist told them not to take lives. The bandit questioned what he was talking about. Until Chinma's attack approached, she dealt with the entire group with extreme ease. She commented that perhaps she should give up everything and reincarnate. The people commented that they dealt with the entire gang with a single move, and that it must indeed be the hero of prophecy. They shouted and glorified the group, but as they passed, Tan said they should release a portion of the world. Trees, flowers. The people continued to glorify the protagonist. For this, at the royal castle, a servant called His Majesty, informing him that a self-proclaimed hero of prophecy was requesting an audience. King picked up a chicken leg and said that this was ridiculous and that he should send them away. The servant said that they had brought the four great delicacy of the world. Then Tom changed his mind, stating that in that case, you should let them in immediately. Tan entered the room asking for permission. Tom laughed and questioned what brought him there. The protagonist explained that he would like to have the royal head chef for a short time, noting that the king had the demeanor of an evil ruler. Tom salivated as he said that in return, the protagonist must give him all four great delicacy he had just brought. The protagonist questioned how he would do that, as it was a bit difficult. Tom said that the protagonist was refusing a royal order, and called his guards. Even as his servant tried to argue, he simply ordered silence. The guards positioned themselves in front of the king. Tom ordered them to take the protagonist's life and enslave all the women. The soldiers prepared under the king's command. Taein said it was no wonder the streets were full of bandits and starving children with such a truly disorganized country. But it was enough, and he called upon the celestial demon, instructing her only not to take their lives. Cheyenne Ma broke into a smile. The soldiers advanced towards the protagonist. The protagonist commented that they had chosen the wrong person to serve. With that, Cheyenne Ma advanced and decimated everyone, giving them no time to react. Tom wondered how she had dealt with all the elite knights. The protagonist apologized for the commotion, but since the situation had come to this, it would be better if they took the throne. He then placed the crown on Kim Il-jung. Tom begged for his life to be spared, while Kim Il-jung declared that he was now a king. The protagonist then ordered him to bring the head chef. King Kim Il-jung ordered his servants to do so immediately. Tien says this situation is truly hopeless. The servant apologizes for making them wait, explaining that this was Sanchez back. The king's head chef Tien questions his appearance, and Tom says it's because he's the son of slaves and is lazy even with opportunities. Even so, Tom finds Sanchez's skills very valuable, and the servant tattles that this pig was exploiting him and forcing him to cook without rest. Tom says he was ungrateful, for he doesn't know what honor is. Tien complains that Tom was truly a disgusting guy. This was revolting, and Kim Il-jung sentences him to dimensional exile. Tom asks them to wait a minute, but the pig king is sent through the portal, screaming for them to save him. Layla says a lot has happened, and the protagonist comments that it was still very fun. Anyway, there was one last thing left. The last thing remaining was this person, the future of humanity, who is very tired. People call out to Chef Sanchez, and he finally wakes up. He apologizes, saying he'd be ready in a minute. Tan asks Chef Sanchez to calm down. Sanchez shouts that he needs to cook, as it will be a disaster if His Majesty gets hungry, but the protagonist tells him not to worry, because that tyrant was already finished. That little one was the new king of Achinia. Sanchez questions if he was talking about the food. Kim Il-jung commands Sanchez to make something delicious with the ingredients present. Sanchez is impressed upon seeing the legendary ingredients. The protagonist says not only that, but the cart was full of the world's other four delicacy, and asks if he could make the best food in the universe. The chef then gulps upon hearing this. He heads towards the kitchen. Yenya puts on her apron and waits at him. The chef begins quickly chopping some onions. Immediately after, he prepares a soup with lava sea spines. Yunya cries upon seeing the leg of one of the paradise rabbits, and together they try to break the dragon egg, using it to fry an egg in an immense pan. Both are under extreme pressure, but manage to smile at the result of the food. Then they return to the royal hall, announcing that it was ready. Sanchez can confidently say that this is the most delicious meal in the entire world, thus showing the immense omelet they had made. Sanchez explains that he salted the flowers of the world tree, cooked with the thighs of the paradise rabbit, filled it with dragon eggs, and served it alongside lava sea spines. Tyan comments that the taste was insane. And Lenara says it was scary to eat. Yunya recounts that she tasted it while cooking, and it was absolutely divine. Thus they prepare to eat. The protagonist enters a trance. Upon putting the fork in his mouth, he enters his own imagination, being thrown far away. He goes on an interdimensional journey, and while crying, his tears reveal a vast blue sky and a field of flowers. The protagonist feels a comforting sensation and looks at his hands. Then he looks at the sky and opens his arms. He continues crying as an immense statue of a goddess approaches. She holds his hands and gives him a kiss. Amidst this absolute transcendence, Tyan begins to cry in reality as well, commenting that it was very delicious. Lenara comments that the protagonist's reaction proves how good it was. Then the protagonist thanks the chef. For now they would be able to challenge Uishikaner in the correct way. Sanchez says he was grateful to the heroes who saved him and his country, in hopes they succeed in the test they had mentioned. The protagonist creates a bed for Sanchez to sleep in, and questions if everyone was ready to leave. He informs the system that they are ready to finalize Uishikanari's test. The system understands and begins to move them to the gourmet constellation. Dimension Tyan says he was counting on the cook, and Yunya simply agrees with him. They are teleported, but the protagonist wonders why it was so dark, the point of not being able to see anything. Ani says she was scared, but the protagonist conjures a light. Uishikaner says she was impressed that he had prepared so quickly. Regarding the test, she proposed it was just to eat the food he had made, but that would be easily done. So with Amashiro's warning, she prepared something a little different, welcoming them to the gourmet cooking competition. Lenara questions this, and the protagonist complains that it was Amashiro's doing. Uishikaner asks if they remember the original conditions of the test. It was to make a meal that would satisfy her, but they would have to gather the ingredients and cook by themselves. The conditions remain the same anyway. She summons several people to the cooking stations, announcing that she had gathered the most skilled chefs from each dimension there, and they would present their signature meal. And if the protagonist's meal is not the most delicious among them, she would not be satisfied. Lenara shouts that this wasn't fair, as she was changing the rules, but the protagonist says it was fine, and that he already expected this. Besides, they would prepare the most delicious meal in the universe. Michiko Nair replies that the chef she was particularly betting on was someone who had caught her attention. For a moment she points to Sanchez, who was standing with the 4 delicacies on his head. The group is impressed by this, commenting that those were their ingredients. Tyan questions the system about what had happened to their ingredients. Yuna asks what they could do. Meanwhile Sanchez opens his eye, ready to cook a fish. Says that was the special meal his clan ate on the most important days. The underwater world cake. He explains that it was more delicious if served with a clay bowl nearby. Uishikaner thanks him for the meal she eats, saying it was truly delicious, but the cake hadn't even been baked correctly. A gathering of the Quillet clan would now be extinct. As punishment, then she tells the next one to come. Kim Il-jin asks what that was, as they hadn't just been eliminated, but extinct. Sanchez apologizes to them. As the constellation said they couldn't share the ingredients, Tyan questions what kind of absurdity that was. Lenara says he knows those ingredients are theirs. Sanchez replies that he was there without being able to return the kindness. He truly feels sorry that things had turned out this way. Tyan says they shouldn't confuse the opponent, as it was Uishikaner who put them in this situation. He calls out to the constellation with a shout, because if she took all their ingredients, they couldn't do anything. Uishikaner replies that he wasn't prepared. In that case she would give them a little more time to gather the ingredients again. She would judge the meals when they were complete, and he should do his best. Aina asks about summoning ingredients again, but Uishikaner replies that she would only accept ingredients gathered by them. Summoning or copying ingredients with magic was cheating. Aina complains that it was ridiculous, and Nara asks what they should do. She asks about using the time reversal ability, but the protagonist explains that constellations are not affected by space-time distortions. At that moment, a strange idea pops into the protagonist's head. He thanks the narrator for it, then he announces that everything would be fine, as he had an idea. Uishikaner says she was looking forward to the next meal. The protagonist comments that it was good to crush everything by force sometimes. It was also fun to overcome obstacles with risky moves. Then he has a question for you. Thou or not, a chef presents a meal to Uishikaner needed Zenan or, but she continues to extinguish all the chefs whose meals she hated without even caring. She wonders if there would be no delicious meal. Then she says that Chef Sanchez seemed to have just finished cooking. Uishikaner asks what it was, as it looked like dragon eggs. Sanchez says it was the most delicious omelet in the world. The constellation replies that it was a lot of confidence to say that. Sanchez says he was only able to prepare the meal thanks to the efforts of the heroes present. Oishikana ignores that, and then brings the fork to her mouth. She smiles, saying it was perfect, and admits, it was truly the most delicious food in the world. It seemed they had a strong contender for victory. The other chefs are surprised that he was spared. Oishikana says he truly brought out all the natural flavors of the ingredients and wonders where he had found them. Sanchez replies that he gives up on that competition. This food was not made with the ingredients he brought, and he cannot proceed with a clear conscience. Oishikana says in that case, was he saying he preferred to be extinguished? Tien asks what she was talking about, as those were their ingredients. No matter how delicious the meal was, they would win anyway. Sanchez tries to argue, but Oishikana replies that it was getting really interesting as the gourmet constellation. It made no sense to extinguish such a good chef. The competition ends and the chefs advance. Oishikana says that out of 100 participating teams, only 8 had passed her judgment, and what remained were the representatives of humanity. Oishikana asks what had happened, as they hadn't even started cooking. Tien says they had already completed all the test conditions. The constellation asks if he was trying to bluff now, even if he was afraid of being extinguished. That was very disappointing. Tien asks if she was truly the gourmet constellation. Oishikana asks why that all of a sudden. Tien wanted to know how prepared she was to eat delicious food. Oishikana replied that gourmet cuisine was her reason for living. He was doubting that she needed more than a simple extinction and would teach a harsher lesson. She would hunt all of humanity, cook them and eat them until extinction. Yodo Reni questioned what the pervert was thinking, and Taeyong called out to the constellation. She had never tasted the meal they prepared. There was a condition to taste their meal. She had to give up being a constellation and become human. Oishikana questioned what he was talking about. Taeyong replied that he had confirmed with Yodo Rena earlier that constellations can give up their status. They, the immortals, would never understand the true meaning of the essence of eating. Therefore the meal they prepared could only be tasted if she gave up being a constellation and became human. That was the taste of life. The girls were impressed by this. Oishikana burst out laughing. She said it was fine, and that she would play along with him. He was saying that she didn't understand the essence of eating. Therefore she would become human for a moment, but the test conditions would remain the same. If he tried to attack her while human, she would consider it interference with the test, and he should stop immediately. Since the constellation of justice was there, she would allow for a fair judgment. Then Oishikana began to laugh. As Shikolo said it was his turn now. The constellation finished transforming and said that for a moment she had taken the form of a complete human. But Tain replied that she was done for. Then he activated the time reversal ability. Temporal distortions didn't work because she was a constellation, but now it was alright, and so he activated his magic. They returned to a green field. Oishikana questioned where he had brought her. Tien told her he could travel to any point in time. Then there was Dekasos, who descended to Earth in his dragon form. Linara asked if they had truly returned to the past. Taeyong told her he was the hero of the prophecy and that Dekaso should transform into a human soon. Oishikana said she was afraid of losing her life. Yajurina said she shouldn't worry, as that wouldn't happen. Tien replied that he wouldn't leave her, and that she should confirm once more that she was ready to do anything for good food. Oishikana confirmed, after all, she was the constellation of gastronomy, and no matter how incredible human cuisine was, she would see what he could achieve. Tain accepted and told her to trust them completely, and that she would regret it even more. Covered in dirt, Oishikana wondered why she was doing that. She rolled around on the ground. Takasos whistled, controlling the exercise, and Tain told her to watch her attitude and sing appropriately. Yunya said he hadn't even served in the army yet. Oishikana questioned what that had to do with cooking, and wanted to know why she was there. Tan questioned if she was talking back to a constellation. Oishikana instantly regretted everything. She continued doing the exercises for the rest of the day. Upon finishing she rested, lying on the ground. Tain questioned if she had finally finished. Oishikana said that if the food wasn't good, he would be finished. Then Tain used the time reversal spell, saying they should continue. Oishikana asked about it, and the spell was activated. Later she climbed the world tree with a rope. She asked what the hell that was, while Tien told her to climb and gather as many world tree flowers as she could. Oishikana asked why me, because if she fell she would lose her life. But Yajirinai said she wouldn't succumb and that they would catch her somehow, while Tien told her to hold on tight. Yuini questioned if it wasn't too much, but Shinma said she was satisfied. Tain commented that it would take all day. As time passed, Oishikana finally managed to grab a flower. She heard the elder say it was delicious beyond words. She approached to taste it, but Tain took it from her hand, saying they needed those for cooking. Oishikana threatened to take his life, but Yajirinai replied that it wouldn't be possible as breaking the test rules was forbidden. Then they needed to go to the kitchen in the Demon King's castle. Zeta burst out laughing. He commented that it was a ridiculous sight to see Oishi Connor as a human now. Oishi Connor questioned why the constellation of war was there, and the protagonist calmed her, saying they would ask politely now. Oishi Connor asked about the situation, and the protagonist revealed that the ingredients she stole belonged to Zeta. The protagonist said they must finish the test and deal with that fool as he seemed eager for a fight. Oishi Connor accepted and asked for the ingredients to be delivered. Zeta began to create several rabbits, eggs and thorns. Tane said that now that they had gathered everything, they needed to cook. Oishi Connor thought it was finally time. They needed to finish this otherworld episode. Everyone is teleported to another location. Detak comments that as a demon king, he was bored in the king's castle. A scream is heard. Tane defeats the guards and comments that he didn't expect to see that fellow twice in the same day. Tom begs for his life to be spared. In any case, the protagonist activates his dimensional exile and sends him away again. He says he will leave the rest to Yunyan, and she accepts. Sanchez was resting in his room. Omiya tries to wake him but warns that she will be using the kitchen for a while in the royal chamber. Oishikanara complains that she was very hungry and wants to know what was happening. Yunya enters saying she has finished. The constellation throws the cards away. She will judge a human but will dress appropriately for it. After going through all this, if the taste is bad, she had better be ready for the consequences. Yunyi is surprised by the declaration. Oishikanara questions what that meal was, and Yunyi explains that it was the dish she had made. Opening the lid, she reveals the most delicious lasagna in the world. She had tested all the ingredients, and the lasagna would be the best. But at this point, Oishikanara couldn't hear anything else. For the first time, she experienced a primal instinct of extreme hunger. She realized that the best meal she could make would be the one that satisfied her hunger, and this would be another unprecedented disruption in the order of the universe. Oishikanara cries as she tastes the food. Sanchez watches the scene from afar and becomes completely smitten. Tyan asks about the taste. Oishikanara says she regrets it, and that it was the first time the constellation of gastronomy had felt this way. It was made with the same ingredients as the omelet she tasted before, but every cell in her body was enjoying the food. So it was a true meal, and she couldn't deny it, as it truly was the best. Yunya asks about the test, and Oishikanari confirms they had passed. The group celebrates their success. Yuna asks if the protagonist knew this would happen from the beginning. Taehyung denies it, saying it was a gamble, but he thought developing the others would be more interesting, so he created the flow in the best way possible. Yunya asks what he meant, and the protagonist replied that it was only possible thanks to her. That food she made at her house was truly delicious. Her culinary skills gave him the confidence to believe in her, and Yunya blushes. She replies that it was clear he should be grateful. The system announces that he has completed the constellation of gastronomy's test and will unlock stage 3 of Ascension. Kim Il-jong questions this, as even when he used it he lost his fights. The system tells him to stop, and the protagonist begs for the next level of Ascension to be released. There was nothing more important than growing stronger. It would be impossible to fight on equal footing with the constellation, but he didn't plan to keep playing with their tests. Forever Yunai says that Oishikanara cleaned the plate, and Oishikanara replies that she couldn't leave any food behind. Yuni asks if Oishikanara was still hungry, and the constellation replies that she feels like she could eat more. Sanchez interjects asking for permission. He asks if he could make a dessert, as he had never seen anyone enjoy food like her. As a chef he was completely dedicated to cooking something for her. Oishikanara accepts with certainty, and the protagonist questions what the two of them were doing now. Yadu Rinai replies that Oishikanara worked hard, and wants to know if she plans to report directly to the King of Constellations. Oishikanara looks at Sanchez blushing. She replies no, as she has decided to remain in this dimension as a human. Yajuranai questions what she was talking about, as the test should have ended and she should return to her role as the constellation of gastronomy. Oishikanara replies that she has given up on several worlds with living beings and needs to rethink the meaning of cooking. The constellation of justice says that this would break the balance of the universe, but Oishikanara replies that she has already made her decision. Then she approaches Yunai and tells her to take it, as it was her artifact, the immaculate cutlery. Yunya asks if it was alright to accept that. Oishikanara replies to think of it as gratitude for the delicious food. Then Yunya asks what she should do with it, and the protagonist says he hadn't seen such things, but they were certainly interesting. Yodo Rini thinks that with the destruction of the constellation of Wrath and the constellation of gastronomy giving up her title, she wonders how much change this human would bring to the universe. Onyx says they should probably share it, but she really didn't know how to use it. Shinma comments on the fork, while Layla speaks of a constellation's knife. Thus only the golden spoon remains for her. Tyan says she keeps it, as she needs to become stronger. Kim Il-jin calls Wei-shi-kun her madam. He takes off his crown and warns that if she were to stay there, it would be good for her to become the queen of the country. Earlier when she was hungry after everything, Ashatunera wanted to eat him but held back, and he respects that. Ashatunera replies that she is the constellation of gastronomy and cannot eat just anything, but she still thanks him for the gift. Kim Il-jung wonders what that was, as his pride was hurt. The constellation of culinary arts says that by becoming a leader in the dimension of the constellation of war, she would learn a lot. The protagonist comments that she probably doesn't know much about the constellation of war yet. Yunya asks what's next. Tien replies that the next test was about to begin. After the zombie apocalypse and a journey from another world to cook, if the pattern continued. Lanara comments that for each constellation's test, it was as if the genre kept changing. The protagonist says she was correct, and wonders how the author can keep changing genres in a single word. Yodo Renee replies that there would be no more tests, as she would persuade the Council of Constellations, so they should return to their daily lives. Yunai asks if that means they wouldn't be taken to strange tests anymore. Until Amashuri appears, replying that it would be difficult. Everyone turns and he says hello. He warns that the next constellation was already waiting and would take them away immediately. Tan questions Amashuri's presence, and Yodo Renee tells him to stop. Amashuri explains that the next constellation was none other than one of the zodiacs, and they should go quickly. The interdimensional teleportation occurs and takes the protagonists away, leaving Wishikanari and Sanchez surprised. In another dimension it suddenly starts to rain. Tien wonders what place this was now. Yunya complains about the incessant rain, and the protagonist grumbles that Amashuri threw them into such a place, and then disappeared. He wants to know if everyone is alright, while the girls complain that they are completely soap. Han thinks this place is bad, and wants to know which constellation made this kind of place their lair. Shinma says she was feeling a murderous intent from afar, and none of the previous constellations had that, so this dimension was something different. Until a voice from below says it wasn't of that level. In any case, to overcome her test, she emerges from the waters, warning that it was impossible. Yajiri Night complains that it was the constellation of despair, and the protagonist shouts that it was impossible. The girl asks to be heard, as this group can no longer endure tests, but the constellation of despair replies that it was impossible no matter what they say. She wouldn't change her mind. The Council of Constellations keeps saying that she overrides the tests, and this means they want him to grow, even by going through extremes. It was impossible to expect so much. The latent negentropy in him was definitely of a quality never before seen, and she wants to consume it. Then she begins to sink the protagonist into the swamp. Layla asks since when that happened, and Yuna complains that it had already reached her thighs. The constellation of despair says that they must fall into despair and lose their lives in her test, and that was her condition. The protagonist questions if she thinks things will be that way. An explosion occurs next. Tae-young calls out to her and asks what is wrong with the constellations, as they created them and now want to take their lives. He really doesn't like her and thus activates stage 3 of Ascension. He warns that he considered having her as an ally, since her design is decent, but he should forget that. Then he prepares his magic. However, the constellation of despair blocks the blow. With her palm she warns that it was impossible, and cannot allow such dangerous actions in her domain. The protagonist thinks that this incredible power and speed were the combat power of one of the 12 houses. The constellation of despair's power was on a completely different level than what Tae faced with Yodo Renee. She truly wanted to take his life without giving him a chance, but Tae also had his tricks. He activated the artifact of the constellation of wrath, warning that he had grown since last time. A berserker punch from Tae struck the constellation's guard. She was repelled far away, and a stellar explosion occurred. Tae commented that now in stage 3, he could control the power of the amulet of wrath. The constellation of despair complained that this was impossible, wanting to know how a mere human possessed that level of power. Tae thought it was possible, and that he could now defeat the constellation. Then he advanced once more against her, but Yodo Renee told Tae to stop. The protagonist told Yodo Renee to get out of the way, because if she kept acting like an annoying character, his popularity would plummet. Yodo Renee said she was protecting Tae and humanity. By this point, no matter how much Amashuri and she tried, the Council of Constellations wanted to exterminate humanity. Tae lowered his fists, and the constellation of despair stood up, saying it was impossible. Humanity would not escape extinction in any way. That was what the constellation of despair had decided. Yinna questioned what that was, as there were waves behind the constellation of despair. The constellation of despair replied that they should drown in the swamp of despair. While experiencing the worst possible despair, Tae complained that his companions were in danger. and tried to activate his ring, a defensive barrier skill. Rimuru stopped him, telling him to just give up and fall into despair. Yodo Renai asked everyone to calm down and listen carefully. The authority of the constellation of despair was that the deeper they fell into the swamp of despair, the more they would be trapped in an illusion of their worst inner suffering. They would likely experience agony worse than any other, but even so they should not despair. If they endured and survived it until the end, they would definitely return. The constellation tried to say it was impossible, but Yoda Renai replied that it was not impossible, because the humans she had seen were astonishing beings. Even if they broke the order of the universe, their wisdom and willpower were incredible. They were not weak enough to lose their lives in her test. In that case, everything would be fine. The most important thing was never to break the swamp engulf the protagonists, and Tain tried to defend himself. With personal exclusion, Yajirinai appeared. Placing her arms on Tain's shoulder, she warned that everyone would be fine and that he should surrender to the swamp and overcome his own despair. As she could not help even though she was unaffected, Taeyong looked back and stated that in that chaos he would leave his companions with Yajirina. Yajirina told him not to worry, as she would protect their bodies. Taeyong deactivated personal exclusion and sank into the swamp. A voice began to call him to wake up, and Taeyong wondered who it was. Kim Il-jin said tea and should buy bread, but he was still lying down to sleep. Then Kim Il-jin slammed Taeyong's face onto the table, calling him a bastard. Taeyong wondered what the hell that was and where he was, because it hurt. Meanwhile, Kim Il-jin questioned if that idiot hadn't woken up yet. Kim Il-jin said he had no choice. Should come quickly. Taeyong thought it was a classroom, and that he didn't seem to have gone back in time. Kim Il-jin warned that he would give him a real education. Until Taeyong wondered if this was the despair situation with Kim Il-jin. Kim Il-jin questioned if Taeyong was coming, while Taeyong remembered when he was being bullied. Wanting to know what that was and what he should do, Taeyong grabbed Kim Il-jung's hand. Then he said they should go quickly, wondering if he wasn't the super strong SSS rank protagonist. Upon going to the rooftop, Taeyong was brutally beaten. He wondered what kind of development this was, because at the last moment, it would surely be the satisfying moment where the delinquent would receive a lesson from the SSS rank power. Kim Il-jung complained that the day was truly awful, and Taeyong questioned why he was being beaten again. Then he tried to activate the rank defreeze, but nothing happened. Kim Il-jung said Taeyong was a pathetic loser, and Taeyong thought that even the weakest skill wouldn't activate without the amulet of fury or ascension unlocked. This was truly bad. Kim Il-jin hit his stomach. It was a situation where despair was his only option. Kim Il-jin said he couldn't even clean shoes properly. Kim Il-jin threatened that if he didn't bring that before the break ended, he would lose his life. Taeyong thought he should be able to destroy planets with a snap of his fingers. This was definitely a fictional world in his head, but it felt so real. He wanted to know if the others would also go through situations like that. Kim Il-jin wasn't originally this cruel. Taeyong rose from the dirty water, thinking that this was like hell, where he was sinking into despair. Taeyong turned around. His battle instincts as a hero who saved the world still remained. He advanced with a punch, but it didn't even hurt Kim Il-jin. Taeyong became scared and screamed as he was grabbed by his shirt. Taeyong beaten to the point of being unrecognizable. Thought Kim Il-jung was asking to be turned back into a hamburger bun. Taeyong couldn't summon his status window or use his skills. If he kept getting beaten, he would fall into despair and needed to learn how to fight. Learning to fight by himself was not an option. He needed someone to teach him. Taeyong remembered Zhou Yunai, who had incredible athletic ability. Even if he didn't learn to fight, he could learn to develop his physical abilities. He decided to visit Yunai's class during the break. Taeyong's nose wouldn't stop bleeding, and it was embarrassing for Yunai to see him like this. Then Taeyong noticed Kim Il-jin talking to her. Kim Il-jin said he would pay for everything, and that she shouldn't feel pressure. Yunya rejected him and told him to leave her alone. Kim Il-jin placed his hand on Yunya's shoulder, saying he didn't want her to play hard to get. Yunya pushed him away, telling him to get lost. The delinquent questioned if she really thought he would keep paying attention to her in the middle of the hallway. Then the protagonist Taeyong grabbed Kim Il-jin from behind, saying they should leave. Taeyong then questioned, "Who do you think you are? Get lost." "She's with me." Kim Il-jin asked if moss had grown in Taeyong's brain. The protagonist thought his body moved on its own, as he felt he had to do something. Then Kim Il-jin grabbed Taeyong's arm, saying that the perverted bastard was getting really annoying. Kim Il-jin said Taeyong was asking to go to hell today. Yunai tried to tell them to stop, but Kim Il-jin managed to apply a suplex, slamming the protagonist back onto the ground. People commented that Kim Il-jung looked like Michael Chandler from the UFQ. They questioned if that crazy bastard wanted to go to juvenile prison. Kim Il-jung asked who would go there, as his father would cover for him anyway. The protagonist thinks this was it, but despair from which he couldn't escape with his own strength. Taeyong just wanted peace. Yoonhee grabs Kim Il-jung's fist. Kim Il-jung questions what the hell is this? Yoonhee asks if he was going to take Taeyoung's life, and tells him to stop before it went too far. The delinquent says that Yoonhee was defending this idiot now, and that there must be something between them. Yoonhee gets annoyed at him for speaking nonsense. Kim Il-jung shouts wanting to know their relationship, and grabs Anya's hand. Anya looks coldly at Kim Il-jung. She twists her other arm, freeing her hand from Kim Il-jung's grip. Kim Il-jung falls to the ground with his arm twisted. Yoonhee starts hitting his face non-stop. The protagonist Taeyeon watches Yoonhee defeat the bully. Taeyeon thinks that was completely incredible. Yoonhee approaches calling Taeyeon a pervert. She asks if he was okay, especially as nape. Protagonist sits up saying that everything was fine. Yoonhee asks why Taeyeon stepped forward, as she could have handled the situation herself. Protagonist just wants to know if Yoonhee is good at fighting. Yoonhee explains that when she was younger, she watched Special Forces videos and found them cool. She started training seriously to be a soldier anyway, even if Taeyeon says he's fine. A strong blow to the nape can be serious. Yoonhee asks if he could stand up, as they should go to the infirmary together. The protagonist extends his hand to Yoonhee just as Taeyeon's fingers get close to touching Yoonhee's. Kim Il-jung stands up, appearing behind her. Kim Il-jung then questions what kind of relationship the two of them had. He asks if Yoonhee thought she could get away with it just because she was a girl, but Yoonhee denies it. The protagonist thinks that, even if it wasn't the reality, Kim Il-jung wouldn't go so far as to hate Yoonhee. Kim Il-jung lunges forward with his fist to strike Yoonhee. Yoonhee was ready to counter the blow, but Lena Rod interrupts, shouting that the teacher was coming. Kim Il-jung stops before attacking and complains. He says that the pervert would go to hell after school. Then Kim Il-jung spits on Taeyeon's hair, while Unhee complains that he was a crazy, disgusting bastard. Unhee asks what was wrong with Kim Il-jung. The protagonist says he was fine. Taeyeon thinks that even if it was a virtual reality, just the fact that Yoonhee was angry by his side was enough for him. Yoonhee helps Taeyeon up. While Lee Nara watches the scene from afar, in the school infirmary, they notice that there was no one there. Yoonhee says that Taeyeon walked on his own, just because he was fine, and that his eyes were quite focused too. In that case, Yoonhee says she would wait there until the teacher arrived. The girl was using her phone while the protagonist was lying on the cot. He questioned if she wasn't going to leave and why she was still there. Yoonhee replied that it would be bad if he fainted. Besides, she wasn't in the mood to go to class. The protagonist thought her honesty was very cute. Then he asked if she was good at fighting, but Yoonhee replied that she didn't want to make small talk with him either. The protagonist thanked her anyway, wanting to know if she wanted to hear something interesting, because he and Kim Il-jung had known each other since kindergarten. Since the protagonist's father worked for Kim Il-jung's father when they were children, they just played together as friends. At some point, the protagonist started to realize how different they were. Then naturally, a friend of Kim Il-jung bumped into him. The protagonist turned around annoyed and came face to face with his childhood friend. Kim Il-jung just turned his face away from the protagonist. That was a distance that would never be closed again. Before he knew it, the Kim Il-jung, the protagonist, was just a loser he had met as a child. Kim Il-jung's treatment got progressively worse until it became what it was now, but it hadn't been that bad before. Yoonhee said she couldn't listen to that. She asked if he was an idiot for letting that happen. The protagonist said that there were strong people like her, but there were also people like him who couldn't do anything. The girl replied that he was a hopeless idiot and that if he tried he could change things. Taeyeon said she only said that because she didn't know the situation. His father's job was involved too, and there were things he truly couldn't do. Yoonhee called him an idiot. She asked if his father wouldn't say anything if he did something after seeing that, and questioned why she was going through so much trouble with that bastard. Taeyeon suggested that she help him in this case. The girl asked about it, and the protagonist said he would give what she said a chance, but she should teach him how to fight. Yoonhee stared at him for a few seconds, but then smiled. She asked if he really wanted that, because she would give him a chance, but her eyes suddenly changed, turning bluish. The protagonist thought it was a wave of despair, and wondered why. Yoonhee replied that she didn't want to do anything with him. A swamp appeared beneath the protagonist. He thought he couldn't just give up like that, so he had to do something, anything. He broke free from the water, saying he liked her. Yoonhee asked what he had just said. The protagonist repeated that he liked her, and thought that in any case, that wasn't reality as long as it became like that. He could free her from despair. But Yoonhee shouted that first Kim Il-jung, and now the pervert. They were acting like lunatics that day. She should have just let the blows hit her. The protagonist continued to be pulled down by the swamp and thought it couldn't be like this. He shouted about her lasagna, because it was the meal she prepared better than anyone. Anya asked how he knew that. The protagonist replied that she had said she trained to be a soldier when she was younger, but that in reality, she wanted to be a baseball player and a chef. Anya questioned if he was some kind of crazy stalker, but the protagonist denied it. He shouted that he was her boyfriend in the future, and thought he didn't care about anything anymore. Yunya remained in despair and turned to leave. The protagonist thought he believed he knew a lot, but it seemed like that was the end, until she held his hand and pulled him out. Unai told him to explain properly, because when she was younger, she prepared to be a chef and a baseball player, but she wanted to know how he knew that, and he shouldn't come up with nonsense like coming from the future. The protagonist looked at the contact of their hands. Yuya remembered that he liked her. Then she slapped his face, asking why the pervert was holding her hand. Tian replied that she was the one who had grabbed. First nurse asked what the two of them were doing. Upon seeing the scene outside the school, Yini summarized that he was lying about being her boyfriend from the future, but that they were companions, fighting aliens in another dimension, and one of those aliens, one of the strongest, had trapped him in a virtual torment space. That crazy bastard needs to be admitted to a mental hospital. Tian replies that everything is true, but now that he hears it, even he finds it ridiculous. It seemed that Yeni also couldn't see how he was being trapped in the swamp of despair, and that was very convenient anyway. Yunya doesn't care anymore and just wants to learn how to fight, because she must have seen in Kim Il-jung's eyes earlier that he really intends to take her life. The girl wonders why she should waste her time with a crazy bastard like him. Tian replies that it was all true, except for the part about him coming from the future. There was no way he could have known that when she was younger. She considered being a player and a chef. He won't lie to her anymore. Yunya thinks that everything he said was true. The protagonist continues. More importantly, Kim Il-jin really tried to hit her earlier. He won't let that go and allow Kim Il-jin to mess with her again. Yunai blushes upon hearing that. Yunai said that this scoundrel couldn't defeat Kim Il-jin in a fight. The weight class difference between the two was too great, and Kim Il-jin was probably trained in some martial art as well. Kim Il-jin must think that a dwarf like Tian couldn't get strong enough to defeat him in a few hours. Tian replied that he should at least try, and it was she who had said that if he worked hard, he could change things. Yunya asked if she had said that, and the protagonist remembered the exact moment. She sighed, then accepted, but said there was no way he could win in a fight. Yunya approached the protagonist and punched him in the face. Tian fell to the ground and asked why the sudden attack, but Yunya said that she had to finish this before the fight began, creating an opening and aiming for a vital point. They would continue practicing until class ended. The protagonist got up from the floor. Tian questioned how he had been hit just now. The protagonist replied that it was because she attacked suddenly with her elbow, and Anye responded that that was the point. He had been hit because he didn't expect the blow, and if he had known, he would have at least thought about dodging. With Kim Il-jung it would be the same. That guy only thinks about attacking, and he doesn't even consider that Tian would fight back, so he should remain submissive as always until he sees an opening in the classroom. The teacher told everyone to look at the group in the room and pay attention. Tian thought that Yunya's training was harder than the constellation tests. At this point Tae-young's energy would run out, until Kim Il-jung called him. Kim Il-jung told Tae-young to follow him, while the protagonist wondered why Kim Il-jung's art style was changing. Tae-young stood up saying he understood, while thinking that for now, he would follow the plan Yunya had made. Kim Il-young called Tae-young a perverted bastard. Kim Il-young said that any action Tae-young took against him would be Tae-young's own fault, so Tae-young shouldn't dare to blame him later, until the protagonist kicked Kim Il-jing's vital point before he finished taking off his shirt. Kim Il-jing went into shock and even cried. The protagonist thought he had found the opening and hit the vital point, and it worked, just as Yunya said. That delinquent thrashed on the ground, feeling immense pain. Kim Il-jung said that Tae-young was a crazy bastard, that he would take his life for doing that. Tae-young sighed, wondering if that wasn't cowardly. Even if he didn't formally know martial arts, just practicing hitting vital points was cowardly. Yunya questioned if he was an idiot, because he was being beaten by a childhood friend, knowing full well the weight difference, besides being bullied and tormented. That was the true attitude of a coward. Protagonist was enlightened by this, returning to the present, as Kim Il-jung screamed in pain. Kim Il-jung complained that he would take Tae-young's life, while the protagonist thought that he had only believed violence was never justified in any situation, so he wouldn't justify this either. No matter how vivid it was, this was a virtual space, and Kim Il-jung was nothing more than a fictional character, made to provoke a specific emotion. Tae-young said he wouldn't let someone like Kim Il-jung bring him down, landing a blow on Kim Il-jung's face from afar. Yunya thought there was no way Tae-young could have actually beaten Kim Il-jung. The protagonist yelled at Kim Il-jung not to even think about messing with him. Or Yunya again. The girl blushed upon hearing this, but hit again. Yunya thought that Tae-young had done it, and overcome despair, until Kim Il-jing grabbed the protagonist's hand. Kim Il-jing tried to change position, twisting Tae-young's wrist. Yunya thought Kim Il-jung was an idiot, while Kim Il-jung warned that Tae-young would lose his life today, until he was hit by a fist in Kim Il-jung's face. The protagonist managed to fight back easily. Yunya thought that even in a submissive position, Kim Il-jong still thought about attacking. Kim Il-jing was truly an idiot, the protagonist thought. It was exactly as Yunai had taught him. He remembered earlier when she got on top of him. The protagonist said it was a bit much, but he was hit by a fist in the face. Yunya questioned what he had said, and the protagonist tried to speak, being hit repeatedly by the girl. She said that instead of opening his mouth, he should try to escape to assume the dominant position. The protagonist said she planted her foot on the ground and pulled her body up. The girl hit him one more time. She wanted to know if it still wasn't working well. Because if he was caught like that, he could consider that he had lost in the vast majority of times. On the other hand, if he managed to get that position, he would win most of the time. This guy Kim Il-jing didn't even understand knockouts and submissions. In that case, if he took the position, she would show him something useful. He should keep his center of gravity at his waist so that the opponent couldn't roll back the arm movements and finish appropriately. He did exactly as he learned from Anya earlier. Repeating that, Kim Il-jong shouldn't have messed with him. The bully was knocked out, and the protagonist thought that the aura of despair was fading. Yunai appeared, saying she didn't expect him to knock him out like that. It wasn't bad at all, and maybe he had a natural talent for fighting. The protagonist confirmed, saying it was all thanks to having a good teacher. The girl found it strange, but then laughed, asking if he was an idiot. Tan thought it was the first time he had seen her smile like that. Then he questioned how she was so good at fighting, since even if she had been militarily trained, it didn't make sense, and Yes said it wasn't exactly normal. Because her father knew someone from the special forces, and that's how she got training similar to real combat. Tan thought she was the legendary, militarily trained high school girl. The girl said she practiced boxing, taekwondo, jiu-jitsu, karate, and other martial arts. Tan thought that now that he had defeated Kim Il-jong, the despair test should have ended. He wanted to know why he was still stuck in that world. Then a tattooed man asked why Kim Il-jong had been knocked out. The two turned around, coming face to face with a group of delinquents who questioned if the loser had really knocked him out. Yunya asked who they were, and Teen replied that they were the Baram group. It was comprised of Park Kang-woo the Gale, named so because of his large head, and Yuki the Whirlwind, rumored to burp a lot, Godi Won the Typhoon, who was simply large, and Zeroth the Stone, who was a trainee idol but was expelled and still insisted on using that name. Jenna said that was very childish, and Tien told her to listen, because these guys weren't normal delinquents. Kim Il-jing's father was the leader of the Sun Pung group. This company started as a dirty group that dealt with gangs. The second-generation members of the group gathered around Kim Il-jing and committed all sorts of mischief, like a gang of delinquents. Zeroth questioned if they were thugs. That was a word for dumb idiots and gangsters. While Yuki questioned the choice of word, Zeroth said they were just good friends. But he approached and touched the protagonist's shoulder. He wanted to know if the protagonist was the one who had left Il-jin, like that the memory surfaced. If he messed with them, his father could end up in trouble too, and the feeling was very vivid. Zeroth said that meant he wasn't his friend, and Tane thought he couldn't resist, even knowing it wasn't real. Yuna told him to stop that. That idol questioned what that was, and if she was Tane's girlfriend. While Tane thought that at that moment, something completely different appeared, traversing the entire space of that place. Yen asked what the hell that bastard had just said, with a completely dark expression. Hey. Anne was reading a webtoon about fusion and was laughing. A friend of Yuna's called her and told her to look aside because her boyfriend was passing by. Yuna immediately got annoyed upon hearing that, telling her not to say such things, not even as a joke. And now Zeroth had repeated that same mistake. I apologize for causing that misunderstanding, but did that mean she didn't have a boyfriend now? Taiwan commented that he was a womanizing bastard, and Yuki said he was expelled from the agency because of women. Yunai told him to get lost while she was still being gentle, but Zeroth questioned what would happen if he didn't. The girl prepared herself in a combat stance. Tien interrupted, explaining that Il-jin threw the first punch, and that's how the fight ended. That's what happened. Zeroth questioned this, but quickly landed a punch on the protagonist. Anya thought it was too fast, and she couldn't even react in time. The block. Zeroth warned that the protagonist should have gotten messed up. Somehow Yuni stepped forward for combat, and the idol questioned who she was, but in any case he didn't hit women. The girl told him to leave, but Zeroth turned around, saying his friends were a bit different. All three prepared for combat against the girl. The protagonist stepped forward, calling out to his friend, told her to get out of there. Anya asked what he was talking about, and the protagonist repeated for her to get out. The girl wanted to know if, just because he had learned to fight, he thought he could handle everyone by himself, and replied that she wasn't even his friend. Yuni was startled by his words and got angry, calling him a loser as she walked away. The protagonist thought that was the right thing to do. Yuni would probably be able to take them all down by herself, but if she did that, she would become a target of the Sanpong group. This was a burden he had to carry. Zero questioned if he had finished arguing with his girlfriend. The protagonist raised his guard and told those bastards to come at him. That idol agreed and advanced with a knee strike that hit him. The protagonist was knocked out, and from then on he remembered nothing, but now he was in the swamp of despair. It was surprisingly very comfortable to be there. He wondered if by slowly sinking like this, he could be free from all pain. He closed his eyes and began to remember all his companions. Then he denied it, saying he wasn't the only one sinking into the swamp of despair, cursing all of it because he couldn't go beyond, asking to receive one more chance. Suddenly a light appeared and he woke up to his father, asking if he had finally come back to his senses. The protagonist complained about all the light and looked to the side. His father asked how he couldn't recognize him. Tien quickly stood up, recognizing him. Then he screamed in fright. While his father questioned if he had amnesia, the protagonist asked if that was really something to say to his son now, and his father said that at least he was alive. And that was a relief. He questioned why on earth he was stuck there, and his father told him that his mother was there. Crying seriously, he kept getting beaten up and making his mother and father worry. The protagonist said it wasn't as if he wanted to be hit. His father asked if he knew who the guy was that did this to him, and Tien said it wasn't just one, but several. His father started to think about it, reassuring him that everything was fine, because that's what he always said, that violence solves nothing. Back in his time, they were children who grew up fighting, but times had changed. The protagonist thought he had worked very hard to hide this. His father said he had the responsibility to leave him in a more peaceful world. Tien questioned what he was talking about, and his father replied that his son should stay in the hospital and recover quickly to focus on his studies. So no matter what happened, he would always be on his son's side. The protagonist replied that this was strange because when he talked to his father, his despair disappeared. Then he told him to make sure to tell his mother not to worry. Outside, Tien's father thought that his son knew nothing about the kind of person his father truly was. Diljin's father's phone started to ring. He wondered why Director Bayon had called, but he simply asked what was wrong. Diljin's father wanted to know what he meant by speaking that way. Bayon replied that he had sworn he would never let the shadows of Sunpon fall upon his family, being the executive director and leader of the strategy group. As night fell on the city, Yuki asked if he was a pervert for having been defeated by the loser, and Iljin shouted that he didn't remember. His friend told him not to worry, as he wouldn't spread rumors that the young master of the Sunpon group had been defeated by a loser. King Wu said they would properly beat up the loser until Beyond Tyson appeared, saying you were the ones who did this. The entire group turned around, and King Wu asked who that old man was, until Iljin's father called, shouting that he was a bastard, and he wanted to know what the hell he was doing. Running around, Iljin questioned what his father was talking about, but his father told him to shut up and come home, because the father of the guy he messed with, a leader in South Korea's corporate world, was a legend. This began with Chairman Kim, whose success story was widely known to the public, but in the past he was nothing more than a gangster who frequented small bars. The fact that he made several mistakes with other gangs was not known, and for good reason, because the legend of Sunpon was a tale of perversion, a story written by the deviant's father. He alone dominated the local crime organization and controlled the local market, completely overpowering everyone. After defeating all the gangsters, he integrated them into his businesses. Using his natural talent for business, he expanded them and made them very large. The bars became restaurants in the underworld. Life transformed into Sunpon Entertainment, finally becoming heavy industry. He led the wave of rapid growth in South Korea and placed the company at the forefront. Taeyeon's father was that kind of man. The condition he imposed when firmly refusing the position of Sunpon's chairman is that his wife and son would have a normal life without the extravagance and luxuries of a chaebol, without underground violence, just a normal life. Once this was guaranteed, he gave up everything, an agreement that bordered on madness, because for this man family was everything. A simple life far from power and honor. When Taeyeon, still a child, asked what his father's job was, he replied that he was just an office worker. Iljin's father says that now he has touched this man's biggest taboo and needs to be safe somewhere. King Wu asked if he knew them, but Taishan replied that he certainly knew them very well. He was the eldest son of Young Hoon from Heavy Industries. Then Tisung threw him away with a single move. Iljin's father kept trying to call his son, but there was no answer. Thanks to the shock, Tisung remarked that violence solves nothing, but there are times when it is not worth solving things, like with these guys. Yuki charged at Tisung with a punch, cursing him, but the protagonist's father easily struck him in the stomach, saying that Yuki was the youngest son of CEO Bang from Sunpon Hotels and Resorts. He should have taken after his father, but it seemed his stomach was not doing too well. T1 called him a bastard, and Zuref told him to calm down, but the fat guy tried to attack Tishan without any strategy. The man simply spoke T1's name, defending the attack with extreme ease. Taeyeon was startled by what happened, and the protagonist's father questioned who he was. Tae-young asked that Tae-sung did not know his father. Go-young Tae-sung recognized that he was the son of the vice president of Sunpun restaurant and that he had grown a lot. But Tae-sung moved next, saying that Tae-young should lose some weight and thus sent him flying. Zeruf and Iljin were startled by the scene. Tae-young said that Zeruf must be the son of the president of the entertainment company, Nam Jin-gu, and that his name was definitely Nam Bong-gu. Zeruf asked what the hell this old man was, and Iljin laughed at the name. Tae-sung got annoyed, asking if Iljin thought that was funny. His friends were being beaten one by one, and Tae-sung wanted to know how Iljin ended up this way, as it seemed he needed a bit of education. Zeruf asked Tae-sung to wait a second and questioned if he could really handle this. Tae-sung asked if when Zeruf was hitting his son, he had even thought about the consequences. Zeruf tried to say he was wrong, but the father said that if he made a mistake, he should be punished, and that was what responsibility meant. Tae-sung advanced while the young man screamed loudly. Back at the hospital, his mother was peeling apples, handing them to her son. Tae-in thanked her and apologized, but his mother told him to forget about it, as he had done nothing wrong. Those who hit him were the ones who needed to apologize. Tae-in replied no, and that he would fight back too. Tae-in's mother commented that the good thing was the pretty girl had called the police. Tae-in wondered if Yeni had done that. Thinking she was more loyal than he imagined, his mother commented that she was really surprised her son had such a beautiful friend. Tae-in questioned if that was something one should say to their son. She continued saying that the girl was worried about him, and that she was really grateful. Tae-in thought he was a little happy about that. Suddenly the door opened. Tae-in's mother said she came at the right time, and that she had some fruit for her. The protagonist was completely surprised, for it was Nara who said he had finally woken up. Nara approached, asking how his mother knew she liked apples. Tae-in questioned why she had come there. The girl said she came to see if he was okay, but that he should know the way he spoke was really bad. Tae-in said that then it was not Yun who called the police. Nara said she had something even more important to say. Leaning close to the protagonist's ear, she warned that they should leave the despair test. Together, Tae-in questioned how she knew about that. Nara explained that she escaped her test and came to rescue him. Tae-in questioned how she did that. The girl replied that to be honest, she had no idea when she came back to her senses. She was inside the barrier that Yudori Nai had placed. For some reason she was the only one who woke up. The others seemed to be having nightmares, and only in him could Nara feel something different flowing. Without thinking, she touched this energy, which was beautiful, and suddenly, she seemed to be sucked into his consciousness. Thus she returned to her current senses. Before that she was inside his inner world as well. So they should leave together. Tae-in said he did not know how to leave yet. Nara was surprised and asked if he had not overcome despair yet, since she did not feel any trace of despair coming from him, and it seemed he wanted to leave there. Tae-in replied that he needed to get out of there, save his companions, and continue fighting against the constellations. There was no reason for him not to leave. His mother questioned what they were talking about. Nara replied that she must be confused. They were talking about things only they understood. Tae-in's mother questioned if he was going to fight again. The protagonist tried to say that was not it, but his mother held his hand, telling him that for them he was the most important. As long as they could live together happily and healthily, that was all that mattered. So he should promise that if anything dangerous happened in the future, he would tell his mother and father everything honestly. Tae-in thought about that for a moment. His father interrupts, asking if he has something he can't tell them. His mother comments that he was going to a friend's funeral, but she wants to know where it was. Tae-shan replies that it wasn't a close friend, and tries to hide the blood on his face, but he warns Tae-shan that no matter what, he should not forget that they are by his side. The protagonist is dumbfounded by this, and he sighs, completely happy with the sweet words, saying that the two of them don't need to worry, because he is humanity's chosen savior. His mother cries, asking what they did to her son, as they must have hit his head very hard. Nara says it's true, calling her mother-in-law. Tae-in holds her hand and says that now that he's realized his parents love him, and has experienced internal growth, he's become even stronger, and he says they don't need to worry too much. Besides, he has many valuable friends by his side. Somehow he feels happy. Then he says he loves his parents too. His mother questions if he was really beaten that badly, but they both love him too. So everyone holds hands. A light emanates from their faces. Suddenly Tae-in regains consciousness. Yudori says he's finally come to his senses. Tae-in asks where they are. She tells him it was the abyss beneath the swamp of despair, and she managed to keep everyone within a barrier. But she wants to know if he overcame despair. Along with Nara, Tae-in replies that she can say that, but the one who helped him most was Yoon-yi, who is still in her nightmare. Yudori says that as time passes, the energy of despair has been growing stronger. The protagonist replies that he needs to save everyone. Nara feels the energy coming from the hamburger too. Suddenly a light envelops the protagonists. Tae-in and Nara are sucked into Iljin's dream as well. Yujirena thinks this happened again. She wants to know what Nara truly is, as she's felt something about her since the Wrath Constellation test. Nara hadn't been affected by the virus, being the only one not to suffer its effects, and she even managed to handle the power this time. Nara also didn't remember, but she had been the first to overcome the despair test. Furthermore, Nara had the ability to enter others' mental worlds, something even Yujirena couldn't do so. Perhaps Nara is something special inside Iljin's mind. Nara says there's a big problem. Taeyeon asks what happened, until a voice asks who they are, because they were in the middle of a match, and the voice wants to know what they were doing, chattering there and where they came from. Nara apologizes and says they'll leave now, and T asks if they are in a soccer stadium. He wants to know if they should be inside Iljin's mind, and Nara confirms, but how could Iljin feel despair? Since he was just a hamburger. Taeyeon explains that Iljin was originally a boy named Kim Iljin, but due to some circumstances, he was transformed into hamburger meat, so this was a memory from Iljin's past, where he experienced despair. Nara asks where Iljin is, and behind her, the boy complains to the coach. He says the coach was taking him out when it was the others who played badly. If this continues, he'll talk to his father and just get the coach removed from his position. Taeyeon says this was Iljin. During his middle school days, he heard that Iljin was training to be a soccer player, but he had given up. But the coach grabs Iljin's shoulder, getting his attention, saying he doesn't care who was behind Iljin, and that a selfish guy like him has no place on his team. Iljin gets angry, and the two protagonists think they know exactly what's happening now. It was probably a theme not everyone finds enjoyable, and Nara says that for those who enjoy it, it was a very good thing. The protagonist, who was once the team's troublemaker, undergoes internal and external growth, transforming into a key player who leads the team to victory. So they'll deal with this Kim Il-jin episode quickly. And Nara says it will be a one-chapter thing. Until Nara gets Il-jin's attention, the boy asks what the hell. Do you know me? But he feels he's seen Taeyeon somewhere before, asking if he was the school pervert, and he wants to know what Taeyeon was doing there. Besides, why he's so tall now. There's also a girl next to the pervert, and Taeyeon thinks this was an alert for an annoying situation, but Taeyeon thinks he's overcome despair. And since this is Il-jin's world, he can use his powers again, activating the time stop ability. Taeyeon says it worked, and he missed the system. Nara says this time stop ability is amazing, and Taeyeon comments that he'll just take Il-jin and teleport out of there now. Nara interrupts him, asking him to wait. If they take the middle school Il-jin out of there, she wants to know what could happen to the hamburger. Taeyeon thinks that if he takes Il-jin out, perhaps the hamburger and the original Il-jin cannot exist. At the same time, Nara says Il-jin has to overcome despair here for it to reflect in his original body. Taeyeon thinks for a few seconds that Nara is smarter, so she's probably right. So he says he'll adjust Il-jin's mindset and refine his personality to also improve his soccer skills. Then they move away, saying they'll watch from that distance. Thus Taeyeon releases the stop time. Colors return to the world. Il-jin wakes up immediately afterward, kneeling on the ground. Right after the boy starts trying to speak, he says he really doesn't want to inherit his father's company. All he wants is respect, but at the same time, he respects his father, which is why he chose soccer. Nara questions what's wrong with that, and Taeyeon explains that he merely adjusted Il-jin's mindset. Il-jin continues, saying he wants to know how much his teammates endure, and that to be good at soccer, he needs connections. Taeyeon thinks that all this time, Il-jin started acting like a delinquent, and if Il-jin hadn't given up on becoming a soccer player, perhaps he wouldn't be so lost now, so he should have noticed his feelings earlier. But Taeyeon changes his mind, saying that Il-jin, who had been a villain in the previous episode, now has a clean slate. They'll help Il-jin overcome despair quickly. Nara replies that that way it will ruin the excitement. So the protagonist uses temporal acceleration, and the ability manifests as its name suggests. Il-jin approaches the coach, immediately kneels, and tearfully begs for forgiveness. The coach is completely dumbfounded, then breaks into a smile. He then calls one of the players, allowing Il-jin to enter the field. Everyone on the team looks at Il-jin with hostility, due to the despair that had previously enveloped him. The young man feels a little apprehensive about this, but the match restarts, and one of the forwards runs with the ball. Il-jin signals that he is open for a pass, but his teammate merely stares at him, ignoring him instead of passing the ball. Il-jin feels sad about the situation. The forward shoots at the goal without hesitation. However, a defender manages to block the shot. The team tries to regroup for the rebound, but Il-jin takes the lead. He runs towards the ball, takes possession, and dribbles past one of the defenders, leaving him face to face with only the goalkeeper. Everyone on the opposing team panics. Il-jin prepares to shoot the ball, but then looks to the side and passes it to his teammate, His teammate is completely surprised by this action, but Iljin simply smiles forward, continues to advance, shoots at the goal, and the goalkeeper fails to reach the ball. Thus the ball enters the net and a point is scored. The forward celebrates as his team runs towards him. One of them ruffles the forward's hair, but the forward extends his hand to Iljin. Smiling at him, Iljin does the same. Thus they shake hands happy. The coach smiles and says that everything was fine. And that time was up. Nara comments that she usually doesn't understand much about soccer, but that looked really cool. Tyan replies that it was a very fun style, which made him want to create a sports manhwa. Nara tells them to look, as the aura of despair was dissipating. Tyan comments that Iljin seems to have overcome his despair. Nara in turn says that she now feels his inner world is truly very fun, so the two decide to keep following. Iljin's inner world begins to close. Iljin suddenly wakes from his dream, commenting that he feels as if he had slept very well. Nara asks if he woke up and if he was alright. Iljin agrees, saying yes, and that he was completely restored. Tyan says that next was the inner world of the celestial demon, Shinma. Nara comments that it could be a martial arts universe and look really scary, but Tyan replies that it was alright, because as he can use his powers now and will protect her. Nara blushes upon hearing this. Thus they enter Shinma's inner world. With the barrier glowing once more, the protagonist's eyes were closed, but he suddenly awakens there. He says he was inside the celestial demon's martial arts world, yet he notices it wasn't quite that. For Jo Yunai and Layla were there. He wants to know why the two of them are there and in those clothes. That was the setting from chapters 4 and 5, where they first encountered Shinma and fought. Yunai questions why the protagonist was acting like that all of a sudden, and Nara warns that there's something in the smoke. Shinma wants to know what kind of foolish trick that is, and why was his voice so feminine. Everyone is completely shocked by this, and Tane questions why she returned to that moment. Is this the moment she experienced great despair in her mind? Shinma asks what that bastard did to her. Tane says that if that's the case, Shinma advances, asking to be transformed back, and Tane simply accepts. The place is illuminated with a greenish hue once more, and thus he is transformed back. Cheama says he really returned and laughs, for that was his masculine martial arts energy. Nara says it's truly over and they can leave now, as he has regained his masculinity. Tane adds that the despair has been overcome. Shinma tries to confront him, calling his name now back as a woman. Shinma declares that she was the greatest man in the world. Heian tells them to move quickly now. Shinma says it would be better to transform her back right now, but the protagonist replies that readers like her more. In this form, the martial artist, Shinma says she will cut him, so he won't be able to open his mouth anymore. Nara questions if Shinma wouldn't think otherwise, for she had already reached the top of the world as a man and was living completely bored days. It might be fun to try to become the strongest as a woman from the beginning. This time Shinma replies that it's interesting. Her yang energy had filled her inner world, but it was transformed into yin energy, which changes the form of Kai. Depending on how she uses this, Chienma can reach a completely new realm. Nara says that's the spirit, and was rooting for Chienma. Tane says everyone should gather there, because this time they will help Layla. Thus they enter her inner world. In her inner world, the crown prince wields a knife and calls out to his wife, for she was his property. Layla asks Jeremiah to calm down, as it was clear she belonged to him and she didn't know what Vivian said. But Jeremiah denies it, for it wasn't about that nor about how she saw him. He wanted it to be of her own free will. Without any hesitation, he wants to know what that is, and remembers how many favors he granted her for being from the Duke's family, while she merely used him and never said she loved him. Layla cries next. She says all she wants is to get everything for her relatives, and she pities him for calling that possessive love. Jeremiah is shocked by this, but laughs, showing the despair in his eyes as he goes mad. He says that even now she is incredible, as expected of the Imperial Palace's greatest villain, the most beautiful flower of all, yet one that still places thorns in his heart. He will cut her away. Thus he advances towards the girl. Tane interrupts, wanting to know what that guy was saying, blasting him away with just a flick. Everything around is blown away. Layla calls out to Lord Tane, and the protagonist says he came to save her, so they will return, and she can forget about that piece of trash. Layla denies it and begins to cry, with despair rising in her body, saying that Jeremiah was pitiable, for he was born with the destiny of an emperor, but with an empty heart that could never be filled. Heian questions for that wasn't right. Layla says that if she truly loved him, none of this would have happened. Nara says her despair seemed to stem from the guilt she felt when her husband lost his life. Tyan says that doesn't make sense, but Shinma approaches, saying she was pathetic then. She will take her life now. Tyan questions what she was doing, and Shinma asks why if these weren't her true desires. pitying the person who struck her with murderous intent. Means she sees her own life as trivial. She hates this kind of luxurious fragility. Layla says that wasn't true, but Shinma hands her the knife, telling her to prove it. Only those who survive and achieve their goals, no matter how worthless they seem, walk the demonic path. If you want to live, you must cling to it, and if you're already clinging, then you must swim with that thought. That's all you need to fight. Nara says that was truly a very cool philosophy, and Tain comments that it was expected of Shinma, for she is very cool. Layla says everyone was going so far for her. Then he thanks them with a smile on his face. Suddenly a light enveloped the area. Renai said it was incredible. They were all overcoming despair. Humans truly are surprising, especially Tain, whose expression was free from the compulsion to do everything alone. Perhaps going through this trial had made them much stronger than before. Tain said this was the last one now. In her dream, Tain reflected that if it weren't for her, he would be completely submerged in a swamp of despair. So this time, he said all his friends would save her. However, they didn't know. Tain wondered what had happened to her. She was a girl abandoned on an island. Tain wondered if she was this type of character. He wanted to know how she ended up like this. Meanwhile, Shinma said he didn't sense any other human presence in that location. Tain concluded that it was a deserted island. Nara questioned what in the world had happened in Yunyi's past. But the girl just stared at Iljin hungrily. The hamburger said it wasn't food, and the girl was startled. Teen said she must have been startled, but it was alright, they had come to rescue her. Yune questioned how he knew her name, and if her father had sent him. The protagonist agreed with that. The girl questioned how she knew he wasn't lying. Shinma commented that she really wasn't easy to deceive. The protagonist said her father had brown hair, lived in the city, and had indeed asked them to take care of her. Yenya hugged him immediately afterward. She cried while clutching his shirt. Tain questioned how long she had survived alone on that island, if she could tell them how she ended up this way. Yuya recounted as she had been traveling with her father. Her dream was to become a pirate captain. Then her father went on an ocean voyage and taught her how to sail. But then it rained and there was a storm, and the boat was truly in great danger. Her father told her to stay inside the cabin, but she thought that if she wanted to be cool, like a pirate captain, she would have to help her father. On her way to find him, the boat crashed and she fell into the sea. No matter how much she called for her father, he didn't hear her. The boat drifted away. She didn't remember anything after that, but when she opened her eyes, she was on this island on her first date. She cried the entire time. Night came and she grew very cold. She even thought she would lose her life that way, but if she lost her life, her father and mother would be sad. She knew her father would come to save her. She remembered the videos she watched as a child when she dreamed of being an explorer. Young questioned how many childhood dreams she had. Yuna built a place to sleep. She found water she could drink. She made a fire to keep warm, and she also managed to find food. She got hurt a few times and she even got sick, but she remained strong. Thinking her father must be looking for her, Layla cried, saying she couldn't imagine how difficult it had been, and that she was very proud of her. Jinma said it was an admirable survival instinct. The girl questioned if she could see her father now. Tian confirmed, and they would go to where her father was right now. Anya asked them to wait a second. She approached her belongings. Tian wondered if this little girl had been staying there alone, and what was Tian doing at that age being spoiled. The girl approached next. Tian said it was alright and that they would go now. He wanted to know what that was. Anya said it was the most beautiful shell she had found there, that she would give it to her father. While telling him she was alright, Tain said he bet her father would love it. Nara said that just as they had appeared there, it would appear where her father was. Tian activated his mass teleportation ability. Light enveloped the group. Yunyu reunited with her parents. The frightened girl had been rescued by a passing fishing boat. However, it took longer for her to reunite with her father. In the process, she lost the seashell. If things hadn't gone this way in real life, Yunya might have had a slightly different fate. But what mattered was that they all overcame despair. Now Yunya, crying, came face to face with Tian, who wanted to know if she was awake. Yunya punched him, asking why that perverted face was the first thing she saw. Upon waking, protagonist then questioned where the angelic girl had gone. Yunya stood up, saying her head hurt as if she had had a strange dream. Yujirena commented seriously that they had all managed to overcome Miramu's despair. Pain called out to Yujirena, thanking her for protecting them with a barrier all this time, but now it would return to the home of the constellation of despair, for it was time for combat. For the sake of universal order, stopping them would be the right choice, but Yuri wanted to see the justice they would carry. Thus the barrier rose from the water, returning to the top of her cliff. Miramu said this was impossible, as everyone had overcome despair, and it didn't even make sense. Everyone exited the barrier. Tan activated his third stage of ascension, along with the necklace of wrath. Thus he approached the constellation of despair. striking it with the Ascendant Berserker's fist, and he warned that they would settle the score once and for all. The constellation immediately recoiled, saying it had no form and wanted to know how in hell. But Teen gave it no chance to breathe, and advanced with a knee strike. Using the Ascendant Berserker's kick, he commented that it was very refreshing, and he had missed this feeling. Muramu called out to the constellation of justice, and wanted to know what in hell was happening. For unless a constellation like her had helped her, authority as one of the zodiacs was something impossible for humans to overcome. Yuduanai states that according to her observations, they joined forces to overcome the test, and she neither interfered nor detected anything strange. Murimo then laughs at this, saying that it means the power these humans possess was insanely delicious for her to taste, so Murimu advances towards Tain. Tain feels the energy gathering, then Murimu lands a palm strike on him. The protagonist is thrown far away. Murimu says that if the Swamp of Despair isn't working, then this won't accomplish anything. She will make him feel despair. With the difference in strength between them, the system activates the emulating fist skill, questioning the difference in strength, or if that were enough to make him despair, he would have overcome it long ago. So he advances towards the girl, who merely analyzes him. Taeyoung uses the blazing meteor fist. Murimu moves her hand, saying it's impossible, defending the blow with her crypto fluid. It made no sense to expect that kind of brute force attack to work. Taeyoung resists this, and Nara calls his name, saying that it was still raining and that place was made of water, so fire attacks would be at a disadvantage. Tain agrees for thanks to the Amulet of Wrath. He was stuck on the idea of using fire, but Murimu interrupts him, saying it was impossible and that he didn't have the luxury of being distracted. She activates a bubble of despair in his head, and the question forms, is she putting despair directly into his mind? Taeyoung tries to break free while screaming, but only activates his electric discharge skill. Muramasa, there was no way, and even that didn't work. Kain explains that he survived by controlling his mind and managing his rage with the power of ascension. He decides to follow Nara's idea and attack with electricity. Turning to Muramu, he says he will advance again, to see if Muramu can block it or will end up burned by his electricity. However, Yunyi interrupts the combat. Yunyi had been watching until now, but wants to know why Tai-In keeps bravely provoking and explaining his actions to his opponent. The key to combat was to neutralize the opponent in unpredictable ways, but Tai-In replies that Yunyi was wrong. For scenes like these are read too quickly by readers, making them brief and causing the reading to finish in half the time. To give more satisfaction, they add dialogue, and he was waiting to reveal more and more. Yunai says she really has no idea what he was talking about, so Heian advances towards Miramu, using his electric punch to push away the water. Miramu says she can't handle this, and that her defense is breaking, but she continues to use her powers. Suddenly something grabs the protagonist's feet. Tien wonders what these things are. Muramu approaches, saying it was useless to think he would defeat her in her own domain. The protagonist releases even more electricity, using the electric discharge to free himself. The splashes fall around them but return to the same forms. He curses for it's not working, but Miramu tells him to stop holding back and just show his devastating despair. Tien comments that this was useless, for she was not the one who would break them. Suddenly an energy dragon formed behind Miramu. Shina advanced with his demonic dragon martial technique. Layla made dozens of slashes with her knife, stopping right in front of the protagonist. Miramu held Taien's arms, and he said that thanks to Miramu, they were able to overcome despair and grow even stronger. Muramu said that it was impossible, repeating the same phrase several times with pure despair overwhelming her. Taien said that this happens when the villain doesn't get in their way and acts like a madman, repeating the same phrases. Layla then said that she had managed to overcome it. The protagonist replied that it wasn't exactly that, and Miramu said it was impossible to think she would have to use her original power. Against mere humans she had no choice but to do so. The symbol of Virgo marked her thigh. Yudurani said that this was dangerous, as it was the supreme power granted to the 12 houses of the zodiac. Now Miramu was in different armor. Then, opening her eyes in her avatar form, Yudurani said there was no choice. Miramu repeated that this was the dangerous power of the 12 houses. The War of Constellations was the first and last clash between constellations since the beginning of the universe. The result of cosmic beings colliding was devastating. Then the King of Constellations formed the Council of Constellations and agreed to prohibit battles among them. Constellations emerged to protect the orders of the universe. He commanded them to exist in the image of his creation, the incarnated forms. But immense power was needed to maintain order, and so the strongest were chosen, the 12 of the zodiac, and the power granted to these 5 was the ability of incarnation, the unlocking of the constellation's true form. Yudoranai continued, saying that what they were seeing now was the one who governs despair in the universe, the true form of Miramu Rimiri. Yunya said she didn't know what it was, but it seemed dangerous. And Chinma commented that it looked fun, and he really wanted to fight. Thus Chinma advanced, using his energy strike for the celestial demon palm strike, but he was trapped in a bubble of despair. Miramu said it was impossible for him to reach her, and she didn't understand, as despair was one of the most intense experiences one could live through. Then Miramu wanted to know why resist, since falling into despair was a privilege of all living beings. And these fluctuating emotions were truly beautiful to observe. Taiyan activated his planet-destroying ability, while shouting the constellation's name, saying he would explode Miramu and the entire planet. Miramu questioned if he was sure about that, because that would throw his friend far away. Taiyan resisted. Beyonce said he didn't care, and told him to just explode it. The protagonist thought that, even as the celestial demon, if he was caught by that he wouldn't escape. Miramu laughed at that expression, which she perceived to be mixed with despair, and noted that it would be useless. Furthermore, she understood why the other constellations were interested in these humans, because for a mere mortal, he was enduring pure despair. Diljin shouted that it was very cowardly. Indeed, she think being beautiful was everything. Thus he threw 2 pickles at her. The attacks approached Miramu. She thanked him, but wanted to know who he was. Diljin shouted for her to remember him, because he might look like a hamburger now, but his name was Kim Il-jong, the man who had stolen her talent. Layla used her malice ability, ordering the celestial demon to be released, and Yunya also advanced. Miramu turned, asking about that, and how could someone be so foolish? Did she call them an obstacle? The waters of despair also surrounded the girls. Nara said that wasn't what they planned, but Taiyan shouted for his friends. Miramu commented that it was useless, and any resistance was meaningless, but a cut occurred. Her face was wounded because of it. Layla had managed to overcome her with her knife. Miramu took the knife from her hand, asking what it was, but she noticed it was the artifact of the constellation of Castrami, and wanted to know why it was in the hands of a mere human, and how dared she do that in front of her. She increased the pressure on the 3 girls. Taiyan became even more enraged by this, advancing and saying it wasn't impossible. Nara asked Eudoria for help, because at this rate they would lose their lives, but she refused, as battles between constellations were prohibited. Nara pleaded, and she was the constellation of justice, and wanted to know if this situation seemed fair to her. The hamburger questioned if she thought that was fair on this scale, since asking to release them truly seemed like a fair thing to do. Renee pulled out her scales. Taiyan advances towards the constellation, wielding his ethereal sword. He then attempts a slash, but Miramu tells him he cannot, and will not cut his companions with his own hands. Taiyan curses and demands they fight fairly one by one. She questions why he would do that, and uses a water attack, saying that should be enough, and that he did his best. She thanked him for overcoming the test and gaining hope, as he was able to shatter her and deliver an even deeper despair. Nara falls to his knees, saying that even Tien. Murimo touches him, saying she thanks him for the meal, but she notices the protagonist was smiling instead. A cut appears on her hand. Murimo asks what that was, and Tien says he had been getting tired since the last chapter, but strangely felt it was easy by this point. The flow would move him, and he was convinced of it, as it was the spirit of webtoons. Miramu notices her friends breaking free, and says there's no way. Miramu shouts Udernai's name, who appears in her armor. Miramu questions what she was doing, and if she was insane for attacking one of the 12 zodiacs. Viljean says that as expected, she knew Libra would stand by her side. Miramu says she thought the order of the universe would side with these worthless lives, but Udernai says she didn't weigh their lives. She was acting according to what she believes is right, and measured the just and unjust of it. Libra and Iljan had the same answer. She believes this is the right thing to do. Miramu asks her to stop, but the girl calls upon the divine incarnation as well.